emerged as a prominent voice opposing the rapid expansion of AI and other large data centers in Ohio, arguing they threaten farmland, strain the electric grid, and raise costs for everyday residents. Putsch and his running mate, Kim Georgeton, have pushed for aggressive measures such as multi-million moratorium moratorium on new data centers, positioning themselves as champions for Ohioans seeking stronger checks on AI infrastructure and corporate-driven development. So, welcome, Casey Putsch.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm very honored to be here, and thank you to Christina to making this happen. But obviously, there's so many people that did that. I'm here with my Lieutenant Governor pick, Kim Georgeton. Not hearing it well? Excuse me. Anyway, I'm here with my lovely Lieutenant Governor pick, Kim Georgeton, who is native to the Cincinnati area and is an instrumental part in all of this. My name is Casey Putsch. I'm from Perrysburg, Ohio, and I am running for Governor of Ohio on the Republican ticket. Now, that being said, this is very much a nonpartisan issue, and I just want to talk about this because, let's be honest, I don't think being here in this room for any of us today was on our life bingo cards a year ago. Now, one of the things that got me, I'm going to be honest, angry enough to be here, because let's be honest, when you run for a high level of office, you're risking a lot. You're risking your livelihood, your life, your family's livelihood, and their lives, and your reputation forever. One of the things that got me this mad was a data center. There's one between my home in Perrysburg, Ohio, and Bowling Green, Ohio, where I go to my shop. I didn't know what the heck it was. Huge development. Didn't make sense for houses. Why would they put anything else there? Well, a buddy of mine that runs a company told me. Tax abatements, skyrocketing electricity bills, basically no jobs, no money back into the economy. And then I started to realize how bad this actually was. Now, at the time in my life, before doing this, I grew up in Tiffin, Ohio. We had a family business, was a small golf course. It's not big and fancy. It was like we're grass farmers and have to be responsible for ourselves, our life. And got a lot of generations going way back with the family of people who had to be responsible for themselves, served in all the armed forces going back. And I'm a product of that. A few details of what I've done. Back in 2012 and 13, I founded the Genius Garage Educational Programs. It's a 501c3 educational charity because I didn't like my college experience. A young person go $100,000 a year in debt for a major with no jobs. We have engineers graduating that literally can't turn a screwdriver, and that's hurting industry. But I figured if I was going to be involved with high-level cars, engineering, and airplane anyway, I should do it in a way that matters. And for 11 years, I've been mentoring our best young engineers and helping them get unbelievable jobs. And now they're employed from everywhere, from Chrysler and Ford and Tesla, Lockheed Martin, and a whole host of other great startup things. And not one of the young people had to pay to be part of it. I would choose them based on what's in their head and their hearts, not because of their last name, not because there's any quota. And it mattered. And I didn't get paid doing it either. So I've got over 10,000 hours in it and some nice awards. But I bring that up because there's no support. There's no support for anything in Ohio like that. We try to do things for schools, but things are broken from the bottom. And that's why I put 10 years of my life and everything I had, my own career, on hold to make a difference. Another detail, maybe some of you have seen this, I developed a car called the Omega car. Now, there's a lot of political rhetoric happening in the late 2000s from Obama saying he was going to retool Detroit, make cars better. We didn't. That bothered me. I knew I could do better because I've been a car guy, restorer, builder, racer all these years. So I set out to build a sustainably recyclable manufacturing car, an actual one proof of concept. Long story short, when I finally tested it, it got over 100 miles to the gallon the first time out on straight diesel, non-hybrid. It's a car that could be mass-produced for something like $20,000 to $30,000. And then I did the acceleration testing, and it beat my Dodge Viper 0.2 of a second, exactly matched the Tesla Model 3 with a full charge. So the third day, I took the EPA's numbers, and I did the math. My inexpensive recyclable car on straight diesel has a lower carbon footprint per mile than an EV when charged at home. Now, I bring that up not to toot my own horn, but to say, where's the support? Where's the support in industry? Where's a politician that even knows how to change their own oil, let alone what industry needs and can make a difference? We didn't see it. Yes, I'm a Republican, but I do care about the environment. I care about things being affordable. I care about all people. I care about all the young people, and that's why I put 10 years of my life in teaching them and helping them at my own cost. And even something small, the watch I'm wearing today. For the last year and a half, I've been prototyping mechanical watches, building a little business out of Swiss parts. And this particular one I built because you can look up the NASA requirements for a astronaut watch, and it meets those requirements. We're going to the moon in the next couple of years, and you can supply it. And I bring that up because there's tariffs that are supposed to bring back manufacturing in America. But where's the help and incentive to do anything like that? Where's the help to build a business when I could do this and bring it to Dayton, Toledo, Cleveland? So enough about me. Those were things because my life work, everything I try to do to see what's wrong out there in Ohio and America, make things better for young people, their education, our industry, the automotive world, inventions, business. There's no support. We're not going anywhere. Everywhere you look out there, every facet of life, we're being torn down, politically leveraged. All the social fabric of America is being torn apart for political gain. So let's get to the data centers. The one that's right by my house, it's a little bit of a smaller project, about $1 billion project. I hear it's a meta center. Well, they got a tax subsidy of 10 to 15 years, not paying taxes, okay? They're not building any new power generation, so guess what's gonna happen? Demand. Our bills are gonna skyrocket, just like the other hundreds that are happening. Maybe it creates a few jobs to build it, but the maintenance jobs are small. 100 or less, $85,000 a year. If I did my math right, that's $8.5 million. So that data center, the only thing that it will give back to the community is $8.5 million for taxes of income. Otherwise, they're not paying taxes. They're not creating an actual product that helps humanity in any way. They sap all the electricity and we all have to pay for it. But what's worse yet is the environment. Fresh water. Because a data center is one thing. It's actually a heater that thinks. It makes heat. Well, that heat has to go somewhere. Lake Erie, the Ohio River, our streams and rivers, and our aquifers. We forget about that. There's an ocean of fresh, beautiful water under Ohio, especially Northwest Ohio where the farmers are. And what gets scary is when you start to see things coming down the pike of they want rights to the water under the ground that you own. So if the data centers are one, raising the temperatures, I think we all have an idea what that does to the environment, to ecosystems. Whether you're a naturalist or maybe you're a fisherman that spends a lot of time, you know. And if you're a farmer, you know how diabolical this could be for water and water rights. So they're not bringing anything to Ohio. And they came in under the cover of night, NDA forms. None of us knew what the heck these were before they were already here. That was by design. Tech bros, billionaire global elite, the people that have no roots in any one place. They go from one place or another to make themselves more powerful and wealthy. Political elite, those who are bought out. They sold their souls long ago. They knew exactly what they were doing. And that's why we're all here, because it's not good and we know they're a leech. So with regard to data centers, yeah, I am running for governor. My opponent on my ticket, I'm not going to bother saying his name. I think you know who he is. He's here to facilitate data centers. Spent the last few years just running for office. President. Takes all his talking points from somebody that's president now. Rides the coattails. Supposed to be in Doge. Didn't do no Dogen. Gets booted. AstroTurfed in Ohio. Why? Oh, look who he's connected to. Remember when he was saying on his campaign trail, I think Ohio River Valley can be the next Silicon Valley, and we thought that was odd because Cincinnati's down here and it's great, but this isn't the tech capital yet. And then if you look at the rest of it, it doesn't make sense, and I kind of laughed at it. But that was BS political rhetoric so that hopefully all us normies didn't pay attention to what's really happening, the data centers. So I don't like them. In terms of being governor, what can I do? Not be afraid to piss off a few billionaires. I don't want to be a politician. I never did. I've spent my life trying to make the future better for young people in education, building cars that are recyclable, that are better for the environment, better for affordability, better for industry, and even a little watch company. Ohio's my home. It's been my family's home for generations, and I care about it. The people, first and foremost, all of them. We are Ohio. We are the best resource, and that means all of us. Democrat, Republican, independent, black, white, male, female, rainbow community, straight, it doesn't matter. We're the people, and we're being taken advantage of. We need leadership who actually will push back and do the right thing for what it is. Understand the repercussions, not be afraid to do it and risk everything for that. And then when they serve their time, leave politics. Go be a farmer and don't be a drag on everything else. Guys, I'm hugely happy to be here. This is not a doom and gloom thing. I just want us to all know exactly where we are because it is that serious. But the fact that we're all here, we can in fact work together. We always hear about the uniparty, right? Two wings of the same disgusting bird. Flip it over and you realize what that actually means is there's just Americans. There's just all of us. We live in the same place. We all want to build our own community. We want to build our families and our futures. We want to believe in a tomorrow. And that's why I'm here to ensure it, because our choices are not good. Guys, thank you so much. We've got awesome experts here that are going to be able to do that. I hope that you will look us up, putsch4ohio.com. I am a Republican, but I do have a heart, and I'm not afraid to tell them when they're doing things that are wrong. And I'm actually more than happy to walk across any aisle because the aisle is just a artificially created divide anyway. My lovely Lieutenant Governor pick, Kim Georgeton, is here. She's going to be able to stay with you for a number of hours, answer any questions. I hope you'll forgive me, but I do have to go to Columbus. So thank you all. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. And once again, I just think that that speaks volumes that if you guys had noted, we had two individuals with two different parties come here today. This is not it's a bipartisan issue, right? This is not one side of the aisle or the other. It's definitely a community issue and something that all of us need to take seriously. So thank you once again for coming. To kick off the portion now we get to the fun part as well. So we get to talk to our subject matter experts in our panel discussion. First, we're going to go ahead and kick it off with Mr. Ben Murray. So I have a quick little bio that Emily is going to read about him, and I will hand it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, Ben. Ben Murray is an economist and senior researcher at Food and Water Watch. His research covers issues such as water and energy use and financial and economic issues surrounding climate change and agriculture. Ben's research on energy and water use and data centers has been cited extensively and subject of numerous media reports. His family is from Adams County, Ohio, where he has been organizing data center opposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily.
You're welcome.
And I'm not running for public office, so you can all, don't worry about that. So yes, as Emily said, I work for Food and Water Watch. So in March of last year, so about a year ago, I put an environmental fact sheet out about the water and energy needs of data centers. That was before a lot of people were talking about it, before the federal government and state governments really rolled out their tax incentives, their environmental deregulation, and all of the things that have gotten us talking about this issue and aware of it now. So I got involved in the organizing effort more personally in the last month or two when just 2 miles from where I'm currently building a house in Adams County, a 1.3 gigawatt data center proposal has come up. Fortunately, it hasn't gone as far as other areas like Scioto County or Brown County, but these things are trying to be pushed through the back door, and so we're trying to raise opposition towards it, but most importantly, transparency around this type of stuff. I'm going to do a quick just 5 or 10 minute talk touching on, I think, the things that the rest of the panelists will go more in depth to. So hopefully we don't repeat ourselves too much. I'm going to first just talk about what a data center is. And so we all use the internet, you know, like we mentioned, we all have our medical records stored on the internet. I pay my bills on the internet. But when we talk about data centers being built from 2024 on, we're talking about AI, large language model data centers, or even sometime crypto mining data centers. So these are new type of data centers that run on new computer chips called GPUs or other chips that I'm sure we'll learn about. And as the gentleman before me mentioned, these chips run hotter than the average chip. And so that's why the issues of water and power are so important with these new data centers. So they run hotter, they pull more energy. So because they run hotter, they need more cooling than the average data center. You hear a lot about different types of cooling methods when it comes to data centers. They're all water intensive. They're all energy intensive, but there's a trade-off. So if you hear someone talk about, well, we're going to use a non-water intensive cooling system, that may be the case, but it requires a proportionately more amount of energy to run that cooling system. And most of the water use from data centers is actually used in the energy production prior to the data center using the water. So most of the energy, that's called scope 1 water, is the water needed for the electricity production. Scope 2 water is the water needed at the cooling facility. And then scope 3 water is the kind of life cycle water needs. But a huge amount of the water footprint comes from the amount of the huge energy pull that these data centers have. So they're basically just large buildings, warehouse buildings with significant amounts of servers, corresponding GPUs or whatever chips they're using, network infrastructure like cables, things like that. And then importantly, huge water and power infrastructure. So even if they pay their rates, even if we make them pay for their electricity, the utility company still spreads infrastructure improvements around the grid. So when someone says they're going to make them pay, we need to make sure that they actually do that, because we haven't seen that yet. So now that's kind of what a data center is: a large campus that has buildings that run computers, pull massive amounts of water, discharge it or treat it, and pull massive amounts of energy to run the computer programs in there. So that comes with huge environmental concerns. I'm not going to touch upon that too much right now because we'll talk about that again. And also, I think if you're worried about the environmental concerns, I don't need to convince you that these things are bad. So economically is kind of where I've seen a lot of work can be done on getting the word out about how these things are an economic catastrophe, especially for rural areas, and especially for areas that seemingly need new tax revenue and need job creation. One thing that's really missing from the data center talk, I find, is people who talk about the tangible benefits. You know, we go to our local meetings and we ask these people, the county commissioners or whoever it is, what are the benefits of this thing coming to our community? And I haven't heard one yet. They talk about jobs, but I think we all know that these things create dozens of jobs over 15 years, which my cousin who hangs gutters on houses will create more jobs in the next 15 years than a data center. So why does that thing get a tax break? You know, so those kind of questions, the job questions, I think we can dismiss. And then tax revenue would be a very important part. But as we're seeing across the state, they have sales tax exemptions at the state level. They have property tax abatements at the community level. And then on top of that, they often have TIF agreements, which means the actual taxes collected on the investment in the data center are directed straight to private infrastructure on that data center. So the actual money making it to schools, fire departments, EMS, and other public services is very minimal. And what that essentially means is the average taxpayer in a community is subsidizing the infrastructure for these data centers. And an example I use is in Adams County, that a proposed data center would be so large that they need new fire trucks to be able to service this building because of how large it is. Now, if they're not paying taxes on this, that means the people of Manchester, Ohio, or Sprigg Township, their tax money is going towards paying for a fire truck that services this data center. In Jerome Township up in Columbus, they found that the fire department was servicing the building so much, the data center so much, that they had to come back and ask for more resources to serve for the fire department to service this building. And if you think you get fleeced the first time around by these people and you think you can come back for more, I have a bridge to sell you. So The economic impacts are very dire, I think. This is not economic development in the traditional sense. We should not be using economic development tools to bring these things into communities in Ohio or anywhere else across the country. And we hear things about why these things are going to happen anyway. We need these things. We need this AI. I haven't been convinced of that yet, but even if that's the case, they shouldn't just pay their share. They should, because them paying their share means they're just paying what we pay. They're paying taxes, they pay electricity rates, which as of now are usually discounted because of how much energy they pull. They shouldn't just pay their share. They should pay their share and then some, because they are coming in here, pulling energy, polluting our water, stressing our infrastructure. So they shouldn't just pay their share. We all pay our share, and they should pay their share and then some, because the amount of money they're going to make off of these proprietary AI services in these huge campuses, it's money we can't fathom. They should be buying us a new fire truck every single year and paying for the operational costs of it. So if your local commissioners or whoever it is are waiting for a deal to come to them, by the time that deal comes to them, it's too late. These law firms and these growth consultants that work with these putting these projects together, they want the deal to go through. But we need to have if we're trying to fight these things at the local level, we need to have our terms up front and make sure that any tax revenue coming is long-term tax revenue, because they need to pay not just their fair share, but they need to pay some on top of that as well. And that's what I say to people is, these are bad deals economically, environmentally. And so people say, well, what would you rather have done on some of these plots of land? And my answer to that is, we don't have the luxury right now to provide an alternative, because they're trying to force this thing down our throat right now. So we need to just stop this right now, because right now, doing nothing on a lot of this land would be preferable for the average taxpayer than letting this deal go through. And that's because of the economic incentives they're given, the environmental damage they cause. So I think we'll dive deeper into why that's the case with the coming speakers. And yes, thank you. Look forward to answering questions later on as well.
Thank you, Ben. And as we go ahead, I just want to show a couple slides too, before we kick it off with Prescott as well. And can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay, perfect. I had not actually seen a data center in real life. I would be lying to you if I said I had. So the first 2 weeks after learning about what a data center was, of course, I wanted to see it for myself. I wanted to hear it, I wanted to see it, I wanted to experience it. So we found some great images, obviously up in Hilliard, Ohio, New Albany, Ohio. There's, obvious examples of them. On the way, I believe it's West Jefferson. Am I saying the city right? It's West Jefferson on 71, right? Over to the right, that's having one built. But these are some of the images that we found that just speak volumes. I wanted to make sure that everyone actually could see one. So different communities have different setbacks, but this was one that just spoke volumes to me. As you can see, a community with maybe a setback of 1,000 feet, if that. Our community setback is only 70 feet in our community, which is terrifying to me. But look at the size of these bad boys. They're definitely large scale, large footprints, large impacts. So I just wanted to have a couple visual pictures, if you had not actually seen a data center up close and personal, to kind of get a good grasp for really what they entail. So next we're going to go ahead and kick it off with Mr. Prescott, and I will go ahead and let Sarah do an intro.
All right. Prescott Balch is, a retired tech executive who spent 38 years during his career in large corporate software development, mainly focused on financial software. He believes we need data centers, but that finding the right place for them is the difficult part. Since resisting one in his hometown of Caledonia, Wisconsin, he has helped communities across the upper Midwest understand the technology and financial risks associated with hyperscale data centers in small communities. His goal is to help level the information playing field for those small towns so that each community can make a fully informed decision. Please welcome Prescott.
First of all, it warms my heart that somebody else has got a firm grasp on this financial risk issue, how bad these deals are is just beyond belief. And I'm really happy there's at least one other person talking about it. I'm going to walk through the rewards of these big deals because I think there are some, or people wouldn't be answering the phone and entertaining the proposals. So what are they? Let's be realistic about them. Let's talk about the risks as well. And I'm too going to hit on the tax break issue because I think that's probably the most obnoxious part of this entire problem. And then lastly, I want to talk about construction and zoning, which for me was sort of a second-tier issue initially, important, but not number one. Now it's really bubbling up to the top of my list as I'm seeing some communities in my state with active development projects, and I'm seeing the firsthand impact on the local residents that has been radically underestimated. So what are the rewards? Well, the rewards are what all of your elected officials are telling you they are, and they are an eye-watering amount of tax revenue. The smaller the community, the more eye-watering it's going to be. And I can't deny it. You look at the proposed tax revenue that they're going to pay, putting aside when they get around to paying it, but that dollar amount is massive. It can be an enormous percentage of villages' total tax revenue. They look at that number and they think, we can chauffeur the kids to school for this amount of money every day of the year. We can pave the streets with gold. All of our revenue problems are solved. No more tax increases on people. This is great. You will also get an abundant number of construction jobs. Those construction jobs will be itinerant labor because most of these small communities don't have 1,500, 2,000 construction workers in them. They sort of almost have 1,500 to 2,000 residents in them, so they certainly don't have all construction workers. And you will also see some indirect economic benefit from that construction. Those construction workers will have to have a place to live, they'll have to eat, they'll have to grocery shop, et cetera, and you will get some benefit of that. And the construction can be relatively long, which I'll come back to in a minute because that's both a plus and a minus. I do want to also address some of the benefits that you'll hear about that are flat out myths. I'd use the word lies, but I don't want to get sued by anybody, but they're pretty close to lies. Direct jobs. I went out to Northern Virginia's Economic Development Corporation, which is easily the Economic Development Corp is easily the most rosy picture of employment you will ever see in terms of published data. And I wanted the rosiest number so I could get the actual data. The actual data from Northern Virginia, which has 550-ish, 560 data centers, is 10,420. If you do that math, that's 18.8 jobs. I'm going to round up to 20. If anybody tells you that the data center that's coming to your town is going to produce more than 20 jobs per building, you just turn around and ask them, why are your data centers less efficiently operated than the ones in Northern Virginia? Simple as that. That's the number. That's a statistically significant sample size. That's what it's going to be. There's a phrase that data center operators use called lights out operation. Their goal is to get to zero. They will never get to zero, but they're always trying to get to zero. And if the average in Northern Virginia is 18, it's going to be 18 where you are, and it's going to drop over time. Because there are so few people in these data centers, they do not generate any indirect economic benefit. Even the smallest towns can absorb 50 new jobs without building a whole bunch of new homes, without adding grocery stores, without adding restaurants. These are such small numbers. It's a rounding error even on small towns and cities. Do not expect any, literally any, indirect economic benefit. Next, there's a joke in software development field I was in. When a user comes up to you and complains about software not working the way it's supposed to, we say, that's a feature, not a bug, to make you go away, because we don't want to fix it. The amount of tax revenue in these deals is a bug, not a feature. And that's really important to grasp. This graph right here, this red and the blue, is a city in Wisconsin called Port Washington that has an active project. Their mayor is running around doubling down every single day saying, this is the best deal this town has ever seen. When we are done, they are going to be, the blue section there, 41.5% of the city's revenue. You do not invest your money this way. Your investment advisor would never recommend you invest your money this way. Having 41.5% of your tax revenue from one single taxpayer in one single industry is as dumb a thing as I can think of. And every community that's really tiny, this is why I'm so upset about these tech companies going after these small towns. They are visiting upon them more financial risk than they've ever seen. Nobody would willingly walk into this kind of financial risk with their own money. But for some reason, they're willing to do it with your money. Technology throws away its old technology really, really fast. It's an industry that is highly volatile. To put this many eggs in one basket is just simply financially irresponsible. This is my lead argument when I go into a new community to say, please look at this and understand that that amount of revenue for your town is not a good thing. It is a very dangerous thing, and this is no way to responsibly run a small town. Next, the technology industry has this thing called a hype cycle, which is the only thing technology people agree on is when there's a new technology that comes along, we get really excited about it. We did this with desktop computers. We did this with the internet. Now we're doing it with AI. Oh my God, think of all these great things we can do. We're going to go crazy. We're going to start up all kinds of new companies. We're going to build new data centers. We're going to lay cable across the ocean. We're going to do everything, and we're going to do so much of it, we're going to regret it in about 6 months to a year. And the bubble will burst. That graph right there is a 2-scale drawing, those two bubbles. The small one is the size of the current data center industry. The large one is the currently proposed aggregate value of data centers being proposed/built. There is no industry ever that grows that fast that doesn't make a complete and utter mess. There will be a mess. Where will your proposal be when that mess happens? When the financial capital gets pulled back out, when people realize we've overbuilt, when some software developer makes artificial intelligence as an algorithm much, much more efficient, and we realize we have too many data centers and their value of them plunges, where will your proposal be? Will your community be protected against that? Maybe. What about a half-built building? What about a half-built campus? Did you just commit 1,000 beautiful acres of your land to something that is now only used to say 100 acres of it, and the rest of it is just sitting there forever, underutilized, never to be used for anything else? Tax breaks. We should talk about this all day because these are the most obnoxious things. In the good old days, when we started doing this, there was a trade-off. We said to the developer, bring your business here, bring your jobs here. People will build homes. People will go to the grocery store. They'll want new restaurants. Great. We'll generate some indirect economic benefit. The community gets jobs. They get temporary and permanent jobs. They get indirect economic benefit. They get blighted property remediation. They get something out of the deal. And someone somewhere was looking out for you, doing the math that said if we give them $1 million in tax breaks, we'll get $1.5 million back in indirect economic benefit. And there was a favorable calculation there. Somewhere along the way to this whole data center boom, we gave up on the right side of that equation. And now it's just tax break, tax break, tax break, and we're getting absolutely nothing in return. 50 jobs permanent is not a lot. It's not worth $1 billion of tax breaks, which is what we have approximately in Wisconsin for 3 active projects, $1 billion in sales and use tax exemption plus property tax abatement. It is utterly criminal and is a ripoff of taxpayers. I'm glad to hear multiple politicians talking about how bad it is in this room too. That was good. Switching topics just a tiny bit, but obviously related to data centers. This is an issue that every community is getting wrong. Zoning regulations always focus on the permanent use of the property. The setbacks should be this based on the building spec, based on whatever generators are going to use. We're going to have noise at this decibel level, at this boundary. It's all focused on the permanent use of the property. Data center construction is really unique in that the delta between The construction burden and the construction use of the property and the permanent use of the property is vast. The construction of these things is heavy industrial and it lasts for years. A single building can take, on the short end, a little over a year. I've not seen that, but they tell me it can be. The one in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, down the road from me, took 2.5 years to go from start a project to operational, and they're going to build 15 of them. So do the math on that. They're building them one at a time because they manage their own technology change risk by building consecutively. They don't build 15 of them at once because they know the technology changes so fast it would be prohibitively expensive to retrofit that technology into the 15 buildings they just built. So if you have a heavy industrial use of the project and it's going to last 10 years, at what point do you have to address that burden in your zoning regulations? No community is doing this. I've not seen one yet that has addressed this problem, and it is the single biggest problem. If you go to any one of these communities and look at the parcel being built, for the first 6 months, it's earth-moving equipment like you've never seen before, and then the next 4 months is pile driving, and then it's industrial-scale buildings. This should be nowhere near residents, nowhere near schools, nowhere near parks, nowhere near hospitals. It is just simply sadistic to do this to people that live nearby. And until the zoning regulation accounts for this long duration construction project in a heavy industrial scale, this problem will continue. And take the focus off of the permanent use. It is benign compared to the construction. You have to get the construction phase right and manage that in your zoning. And get your communities to stop now and realize this problem exists. Take a pause, fix the zoning. Don't visit this problem on people. Don't sadistically visit this problem on people that live nearby. These should be nowhere near humans when they build these things. And I think that's it. Probably a little more than 10 minutes, but you get me started, I can't stop.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say, and Emily, I was going to say, Spencer, if you want to come up. Yes, I do not know how to say his last name. Dirrig? Okay, Dirrig, thank you. I was going to say, welcome, Spencer. Dirrig, am I saying that right? Okay, I'll go ahead. And then...
Awesome. And for slides, are they doing slides? Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Spencer Dirrig is the Vice President of Government Affairs at the Ohio Environmental Council Action Fund, where he leads a statewide team working with lawmakers, partners, and communities to advance policy on clean energy, water, land conservation, and democracy. A Columbus-based advocate and political strategist, he has built a career at the intersection of policy and politics, leading bipartisan lobbying efforts, helping secure millions in public funding, and supporting the passage of legislation and ballot initiatives across Ohio, including Link US in Central Ohio. Dirrig previously founded a political consulting firm where he recruited candidates and managed campaigns at the local, state, and federal level, helping elect a diverse state of leaders, and later served as vice president for the Midwest at the Young Democrats of America, supporting state parties and developing national programming. A lifelong Ohioan, he graduated summa cum laude from the Ohio State University with degrees in political science and economics, grounding his work in both policy, expertise, and practical political change.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? I shouldn't have copy and pasted my LinkedIn profile clearly, so it's my bad. But thank you so much for being here. I'm Spencer Dirrig. I'm Vice President of Government Affairs for the Ohio Environmental Council, and I am going to be relying on my notes heavily today because I'm about to throw a lot of statistics at you, and I'd like to get those numbers right. But the too long didn't read version of this presentation, I was asked to address the environmental impact of data centers on energy, water, and cooling in particular. So the long story short here is the impact is pretty substantial. So I'm going to be taking you through a few things here. First off, why is Ohio ground zero in this conversation? So Ohio already has 200 data center facilities, with roughly half concentrated just in central Ohio. That already makes us second in the country for the number of hyperscale data centers. Data centers have received approximately $2.5 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars, in state and local tax incentives since 2014. And the OEC Action Fund has been fielding calls from across the state from communities who are concerned about water use, they're concerned about air pollution, and they're concerned about what this means for the future of their communities. So let's start off by talking about what a hyperscale data center is. A data center is a physical facility that houses critical applications, servers, and data, basically the backbone of our modern internet and growing technology. However, hyperscale data centers are a different category entirely than just what you would call your average data centers. They're massive in size, typically built on rural campuses, and are designed for economies of scale. They can take over 10,000 square feet to build and house over 5,000 servers, each of those 5,000 servers running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They never turn off. One report found that global demand for data center capacity could more than triple by 2030. This scale of continuous around-the-clock operation is the root of the resource challenges that I'm going to be talking about more in detail here in a moment. So let's start off with energy. Why do data centers use so much energy? I think it's important that we understand why these problems are happening in order for us to really confront them responsibly and in the most effective way possible. So servers must run continuously. Unlike a lot of other industrial facilities, there's no off switch on a data center. A single large data center can use as much electricity as tens of thousands of homes. In 2023, US data centers consumed an estimated 176 terawatt hours of electricity. That is more than the entire annual energy consumption of the state of New Jersey. Let that sit for 1 second. The entire state of New Jersey. Nationally, data centers roughly account for about 4% of US electricity demand, but reports show that the demand for the electric demand that these data centers are going to be pursuing is projected to rise to 6 to 12% by 2028. So we're seeing a massive increase on top of this already large share. Ohio specifically has faced the forefront of this problem. PJM, which is our regional grid, PJM capacity prices surged from 29 megawatt hours per day to $329 in 2 years. That is a tenfold increase, and data centers account for 63% of that spike. For the average Ohio family, that translates into roughly $70 more per month on their electric bill by 2028. AEP Ohio, which is the main utility in central Ohio, customers saw an average increase of $27 a month last summer due to new generation costs. And all the while, Ohio's sales tax exemptions for data centers equipment, so this is not even the property tax exemption that we've been talking about, but also the sales tax exemption on all the supplies that they use to build these data centers. They don't have to pay sales tax on much of it. That sales tax exemption has exploded from just $30 million in 2018 to $140 million in 2025. That's a 3,000% increase while generating just 356 jobs across 13 agreements. That's roughly $1 million per job that we are paying as taxpayers to subsidize these locations. So let's talk about the water impact. That was the energy. Let's talk about the water impact. So why do these need to use so much water? Again, all those servers are running 24/7 and they generate an enormous amount of heat. And if that heat is not removed, the equipment fails. Anyone who has ever used their laptop on their lap for a little bit too long on the couch knows it starts to get real hot at the bottom. And if you don't stop it, it's going to break the computer. Same rule applies here, but like times 1,000 or more probably. what we see is that if that heat is not removed, the equipment fails. So cooling is fundamentally not optional, it is a core operational requirement. The most common method of cooling is currently evaporative cooling, where water passes over pads or membranes as it evaporates and it cools the surrounding air. The critical problem with that is that most of that water is then lost to the atmosphere. It does not return easily to our rivers, lakes, or groundwater. It is into the atmospheric system and goes back into the ocean. This is called consumptive use, a permanent loss from local water supply. So how much water exactly are we talking about? Hyperscale data centers can use between 1 and 5 million gallons of water per day. 5 million gallons of water per day is roughly the water a city the size of about 50,000 people needs, which is a sixth of the size of Cincinnati. Nationally, in 2023, data centers consumed 17 billion gallons of water, and hyperscale data centers are projected to withdraw as much as 150 million gallons over the next 5 years. That would be equivalent to what 4.6 million American households would use over that same period. Ohio has a total of 4.8 million households. I wish I could say it stops there, but there is more, because there is also a water energy nexus problem. Even data centers, as one individual has mentioned so far, even data centers that use what they call efficient or low water required cooling centers still drive massive indirect water use on top of their cooling water use. So generating electricity requires water. Generating electricity using coal, natural gas, or nuclear power plants all rely on water for cooling. 70% of all Great Lakes water use in 2023 was not associated with just drinking water or other water uses. It was associated with power generation and cooling. A data center that switches to less water-intensive cooling may simply be shifting that water demand to the power plant supplying the electricity. Energy decisions are fundamentally also water decisions, and Ohio communities are rarely shown both sides of that ledger. So let's talk about, did we skip one? Or oh yeah, I'll just talk briefly about wastewater impacts. I think I missed the slide, sorry. So it's not just about how much water that data centers use. It's not just about how much water data centers use, it's about what happens when they come back out. Data centers discharge heated water and cooling tower blowdown. This is water contaminating elevated concentrations of salts, biocides, and corrosion inhibitors. In 2026, the Ohio Environmental Council Law Center filed comments opposing the Ohio EPA's proposed general permit for data center wastewater discharges, which would have effectively allowed, which effectively can still, the Ohio EPA is still considering this, allow data centers to discharge their wastewater directly into our lakes, rivers, and streams. Effectively, this would be a rubber stamp that fails to satisfy Clean Water Act requirements. One of the really interesting components of this is even just getting into this information over the last few months has been a lot of people talk about the water impacts, a lot of people talk about the energy impacts, but there's a growing science around the air health impacts coming from directly from these data centers and indirectly, and I want to name that as well. A report from Community and Environmental Defense Services found that a single data center could pose negative health risks to people living as close as as far as a half mile away. And risks increase when their home is near multiple data centers. Air pollution risks come from data centers emitting nitrogen dioxide and tiny inhalable particles that harm people's lungs. Data centers also rely on diesel backup generators, among the strongest pollutants, which run during testing and outages. Developers pursuing behind-the-meter natural gas generation, which is the majority of data centers and hyperscale proposed data centers in Ohio right now, bring additional fossil fuel infrastructure and air pollution directly into our communities. To be clear, Ohio does not currently require health impact assessments before data centers are sited. Groundwater is also a very big concern. I'm going to talk a little bit about Columbus because that's where the vast majority of the data centers coming to Ohio have gone, or to central Ohio. And so that's where some of this concern is the most concentrated. But fewer than 1/3 of data centers, just nationally, track water usage comprehensively across their facilities. More than 97% of data centers rely on municipal water supplies, so their individual use is invisible to public records. In order to further hide that data from individuals and from the public, many companies shield projected water and energy use behind non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs, even when communities are being asked to approve zoning or tax incentives. To be clear, local governments cannot plan for what they cannot measure, and Ohio communities are increasingly being asked to make permanent land use decisions with incomplete information. And you have to ask yourself why that is. So lastly, before I talk about some solutions, the transparency problem. And this is a really critical issue here. Actually, is what I was just talking about, my bad. I just forgot to have you move the slide, so I already hit that. So let's talk about some solutions. So what is the OEC Action Fund, our 501c4 organization, calling for? First off is transparency. We want full public disclosure of water and energy use, a ban on NDAs for resource consumption data, and full transparency for communities. Second, we want to protect our communities, which means preserving local government authority to stop state preemption on data center siting. There is legislation that has been proposed at the state level that would preempt local governments, so we want to make sure that doesn't happen. Third, comprehensive planning. We need to require statewide water and energy impact analysis, extend and strengthen the proposed Data Center Study Commission, and produce meaningful recommendations about our land, our water, and our air. Fourth, ratepayer protections. This is really critical for all those folks who are worried about your rising energy costs, as you should be. Data centers must pay the full cost of water, wastewater, and grid infrastructure. It's not enough just to pay for the power they're using, but when they demand such a large share of our new energy supply, that requires upgrades and investments in our infrastructure, which they're not currently paying for, and those costs fall on us as consumers and ratepayers. So data centers should be paying for that grid infrastructure, which means extending something good, actually, the AEP has done in Central Ohio and got approved by the statewide Public Utilities Commission, is something called an 85% capacity rule, which basically ensures that they cannot put infrastructure costs on massive new demand upon ratepayers and then not use that demand. They will have to pay for the demand that they are projecting. We also want to end the $140 million in statewide sales tax exemptions. Finally, number 5 is conserving our resources. We want strong water efficiency standards. We want to prohibit withdrawals during drought conditions, require the use of reclaimed or non-potable water when feasible, require health impact assessments when siting near schools and neighborhoods because it's common sense. Ohio has a real choice in this matter, and we can let the industry come in and get started before writing the rules and let them write the rules, or we can write them first. And we are here to make sure that communities have a voice before the permits are signed and that we take action to protect our environment. Thanks so much. Sorry about that.
Next up, we have Nathan Alley.
Nathan Alley is a conservation program coordinator for Sierra Club Ohio, where he works to advance climate action, clean energy, and environmental justice across the state. A native of Greater Cincinnati and an environmental attorney by training, he spent more than a decade practicing environmental and land use law before joining Sierra Club in 2014. Alley serves on Cincinnati's Environmental Advisory Board and the Green Cincinnati Plan Steering Committee, helping shape local policy on climate sustainability and green infrastructure. He also teaches as an adjunct assistant professor in environmental studies at the University of Cincinnati, connecting students with real-world campaigns to protect public health, communities, and natural resources. Alley is a graduate of Indiana University Bloomington and the New York University School of Law. Please welcome Nathan Alley.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And thank you very much for having me here today and for having all of us. I've already learned a lot today, and I hope you all have as well. And I'm assuming that most of us are here because we have some small inkling of the problems associated with data centers. And we want to learn more about that problem and then what we can do about it. So I'm going to try to provide a bridge from what Spencer was talking about to what some of our other panelists are going to talk about. And we're really going to focus on solutions. First, I did want to just really quickly introduce the Sierra Club in case some of you don't know who we are. The Sierra Club is a national organization. We bill ourselves as one of the oldest and largest in the country, but we have an Ohio chapter. That's actually who I work for. And we also have a very active local group called the Miami Group that does wonderful programming. Our mission is to explore, enjoy, and protect in that order. And so they'll help you get outside and enjoy our abundant environment here in Ohio and in Southwest Ohio. And then we'll also work on protecting it together. So let's talk about that a little bit today. I'm going to talk about the environmental impacts that Spencer went very detailed in and provided some great information. So thank you very much. I'm just going to glide on that. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about some policy prescriptions that have been discussed in Ohio, what has sort of been the state of play up until 2026 and kind of where we're going from here. So join me as we dive into that. What are, again, the environmental impacts that Spencer so eloquently talked about include impacts on water quality, impacts of overconsumption of water. We've got air impacts. We've got impacts associated with global climate change. And then we've also got impacts associated with land use, and particularly the conversion of either active agricultural lands, perhaps habitat conversion, or even land that could otherwise be used for higher and better uses, such as affordable housing. So we've got all these pressures, all these impacts. How do we avoid them? Number one, don't build more data centers. It's that simple. Obviously, that's probably not going to be how it's going to happen. So, what are some other tricks that we can use? So I mentioned land use. The number one thing, of course, is we don't want to use green fields, places that have been undisturbed previously, that are already host to communities of organisms and ecosystems, or are otherwise, again, better used for things like agriculture and housing. So we need to make sure that new data centers, if they are being built, are sited appropriately in areas that are zoned for those types of uses. We also, of course, as Spencer was talking about, want to limit data centers' use of fresh water, water that should and could be used for other very important things, and that we do not have endless quantities of, even here in Ohio, where we're luckier than some of the states out west. And then speaking of water, of course, Spencer again mentioned all of the wastewater impacts associated with data centers. Let's ensure that those just don't happen. Let's make them closed loop systems. Recycle the water, use other systems to keep that wastewater out of our drinking water supplies, out of our ecosystems, out of our surface waters and groundwaters. And then we also, of course, need to control air pollution, not only from the data centers themselves, but from the energy generation that is used to power them. And speaking of that energy generation, if we are going to be powering these data centers, let's do it with 100% renewable energy. Let's not be building new natural gas plants, new coal-fired plants, and no new nuclear anywhere, please. So what are some people doing to potentially affect these solutions already? So to rewind, you've already heard it mentioned several times already, but for more than a decade now, Ohio's stated statewide policy has been to encourage the development of data centers. The state legislature has actively welcomed data centers to locate in Ohio. And the way they did that initially was through the operating budget in 2013. It was House Bill 59 that gave that sales tax exemption that you've heard mentioned to data centers' purchases of their equipment and other infrastructure. And you've heard the statistics about how much money we're losing out on in the tax base because of that. But also it's one of the many incentives that's being used to try to get more data centers. We're trying to limit them, slow the growth of data centers, not accelerate that growth. But that has been statewide policy for at least 13 years now, more data centers. For a long time, there wasn't much specific legislation about them, but in the last legislative session, 2023-2024, there were some bills that were introduced, again, primarily to spur more data center development in Ohio. And very concerningly, I think it was already mentioned, but some of these bills would have limited local land use control over the siting and zoning of these centers and put that decision at a state level. This, of course, dives into the whole issue of home rule and how much do we want to put decisions that affect local communities at a decision-making level that is above them and may not consider what their needs and concerns might be. So we want to keep local control over these land use decisions. And so fortunately, most of those bills kind of died a quiet death. But still, again, the tenor was to support more data center development. Fast forward to 2026, and if you do a quick search, there's at least 6 bills on the table that, or at least some have already passed, that address data centers in some way. And an important one, which was actually just about a year ago, was House Bill 15. This was a large bill that covered a lot of energy topics. But one thing it did, it allowed data centers and other industries to essentially build their own on-site or adjacent power generation. It has to be what's called behind the meter, so they're not plugged into the grid in that way. They're generating their own power. And in some ways, you might think that's not a bad thing because they're not then competing, they're not driving up rates, they're not putting pressure on the system, and all those things are true. Unfortunately, what's probably anticipated is that all those on-site generators are going to be natural gas, right? We don't want that for all the hosts of reasons that we've heard about: local air quality, global climate change, and not only that, but extrapolating back to where the natural gas is coming from. I've seen some folks in the audience today who are working really hard, for example, to stop oil extraction in our state parks, right? And all of the dangers that come not only with just traditional extraction, but hydraulic fracturing for natural gas and oil. And so the bill, again, was House Bill 15. It was a large energy policy bill that already passed. That is going to potentially unlock more potential for data center development in Ohio. But fortunately, now here in 2026, we have some bills on the table that would seek to actually address some of the problems and achieve some of the solutions that we've heard about today. One important bill is Senate Bill 378. You might hear a little more about this in a minute, but it would control water consumption and ensure that the data center consumption of water is not stressing local water systems and being borne on water ratepayers. And then similarly, you've heard a lot about shielding ratepayers from the costs of developing infrastructure associated with data centers. House Bill 706 would speak to that. So there are 2 good bills on the table in Ohio right now that would talk to some of these problems. Then there's also a bill that you're probably going to hear more a lot about if you haven't already, and that is Senate Bill 646. And this would establish a commission to study data centers. Interestingly, we have all the information. We've heard it today. We don't need to do a whole lot more study to figure out why they're bad and what we need to do about it. But this would at least be a step in the right direction. What we want to ensure, however, is this is a bill that just doesn't get lost in a file drawer somewhere and become carte blanche because they studied it, quote unquote, to let data centers run free in Ohio. And so I think you're going to hear a little bit more about these. The last thing I wanted to touch on, and I mentioned it earlier, is the importance of local control over these projects and community voices in where these projects are going to be sited or whether they're going to happen at all. And fortunately, we've got communities like the city of Cincinnati. I imagine many of you probably are local, and the city of Cincinnati has a moratorium at the moment on data center development as it considers its zoning options moving forward and where they ought to be placed, what kind of restrictions ought to be placed on the development of data centers. And I know that the city of Cincinnati is not alone in having that conversation in Ohio. And if your community is not having that conversation, I would encourage you to ask people to do so. I'm going to stop there, but I think we're going to be available for questions after the panel. And I just wanted to thank everybody again for all the great information you've shared today. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate you all for being here. Thanks again.
Great job. Thank you. Next up, we have Molly Bryden.
Molly Bryden is the climate and sustainability researcher at Policy Matters Ohio, a nonprofit, nonpartisan research institute focused on building a more vibrant, equitable, and sustainable Ohio. She leads research on clean energy, climate policy, and the impacts of large energy users such as data centers, helping communities and lawmakers understand how to balance economic development with environmental and equity concerns. Bryden has authored analysis on federal climate investments, community solar, and Ohio's data center build-out, emphasizing the need for strong labor standards, community benefits, and protections for working families and ratepayers. She holds a bachelor's degree in sociology from Case Western Reserve University and a Master of Public Administration in Nonprofit Management from Cleveland State University, bringing a justice-focused perspective to statewide climate and energy debates. Welcome, Molly.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to be talking through some of Policy Matters Ohio's work on data centers to date. So we kind of made our first foray into this work when our research director released a report on the expensive state tax breaks for data centers that was published last year. We started getting more in the weeds once we received a request for support from a community member in Wilmington, Ohio, and we responded to a harmful property tax abatement on a $4 billion Amazon data center project, which we co-wrote with our partners Good Jobs First, delivered to Wilmington City Council. And we recently released a data center brief to tee up our broad policy platform for mitigating harms and empowering communities who are navigating the data center boom. So our policy platform centers around state and local taxpayer subsidies, community benefits and guardrails, good jobs and labor standards, democracy and transparency, and energy affordability and environmental protections. Today, I'm just going to be focusing on the tax subsidy side of things, a little bit about economic development opportunities and the energy and grid impacts of the rapid expansion of data centers across Ohio. Okay, so we heard a bit about the the sales tax exemption for data centers, and I just want to highlight that the state will forego more than $140 million a year in sales tax revenue for data centers in fiscal years 2026 through 2027, and that amount will only grow as the data center expansion accelerates. And in fact, I think it's interesting to point out how data center companies can kind of exploit or find loopholes in these agreements. For example, the incentive package that the state offered to Amazon in 2014 isn't set to expire until 2055. And that was far before we really saw this rapid proliferation of hyperscale data centers, which is the larger facilities that are drawing way more energy and water, which strains our grid and drains our natural resources. We're also seeing a growing narrative about the need for expensive state and local tax subsidies using job creation estimates to make the claim that data centers aren't a driver for long-term growth. However, it is important to acknowledge that, especially during the construction phase, these projects have created long-term steady work for the building and construction trades unions because the work requires such specialized labor, and the construction timelines sometimes range up to several years, depending on the scope. Data center investment has produced substantial work for the labor unions, along with opportunities to connect Ohioans to good-paying union jobs through apprenticeship training programs. But beyond the jobs created during the construction phase, data center projects often offer negligible social and economic benefits to the surrounding community while straining our grid and our natural resources, which we've already covered a lot of in the previous conversations. So when considering all the negative externalities surrounding irresponsible data center development, that really calls into question whether these taxpayer subsidies are necessary And in fact, Bo Williams, who is an executive with Microsoft who works on data centers, stated himself that he can't think of a site selection or placement decision that was decided on a set of tax incentives. So at the same time, local governments also forfeit local tax revenue through long-term property tax abatements to incentivize investment from data center companies. If the tax incentives are used, they should be contingent on communities or contingent on commitments to strong labor standards and meaningful community benefits. But we've reviewed a few community reinvestment area agreements between local governments and Amazon data centers, which essentially include copy-paste language that does not create any guardrails or enforcement mechanisms that would require a data center company to make good on the job creation estimates that they include in these agreements. And again, just going back to all of the potential harms risked by irresponsible data center development, we have been hearing from local communities across the state about their concerns around data centers coming to town. And water use has emerged as a leading concern among Ohio communities, closely followed by energy affordability and ratepayer protections and air quality and air pollution. Also touching on other issues like public health, ranging from noise pollution to transparency and NDAs to wildlife protections. And these concerns and requests for support have really been ramping up as we see data centers proliferate across the state. Ohio is home to around 200 data centers in operation with a handful of planned facilities. Most of these are co-locations or smaller facilities needed to store data, process data, and support things that we use daily like cloud services. But the main concern is the recent growth in large data centers, sometimes known as hyperscalers, that are being built to support AI and other large machine learning programs, which puts immense pressure on our energy and water systems and other resources needed to power them. And the lion's share of those hyperscalers are concentrated in central Ohio. Data centers and the hyperscalers in particular have serious implications for energy affordability, grid reliability, and fossil fuel reliance. In the last 10 years, average demand for commercial customers increased by 24%, while residential demand remained relatively flat. And at the same time, residential customers saw their average monthly electricity costs increase by 35%. And we don't have the data to directly link the increasing rates to data center growth alone. The rapid expansion and the irresponsible development decisions that are being made across the state only exacerbate the growing risk of an energy supply shortfall while driving up costs for residential and small commercial ratepayers, especially without stronger ratepayer protections. And this is because in recent years, there's been a huge surge in supplemental transmission spending, and there are a range of drivers for those projects. And supplemental transmission projects are those that are needed for local reliability needs and aren't required to meet regional or federal reliability standards. A lot of those supplemental transmission projects are linked to customer requests. So a data center would have to approach a utility and make a request to add a certain amount of load, which is then brought to PJM's Transmission Expansion Advisory Committee. And then they take those proposals under consideration, identify alternative solutions, and estimate costs. In AEP's transmission zone, which covers central Ohio, where most of the hyperscalers are located, those customer requests have an ultimate cumulative peak demand of nearly 10 gigawatts, which is enough to power more than 500,000 homes. Some of these projects might not actually materialize due to a range of factors like local decision-making outcomes at future TEAC meetings, and the fact that data centers tend to shop around for more favorable regulatory environments, which has led to duplicative requests and corresponding overinflation of speculative load growth, which is used to determine the capacity prices that we pay. And just to oversimplify it, we need to make sure that we have enough generation capacity connected to the grid to meet demand at any given time, especially during times of peak demand when energy consumption is high and there's risks around grid stress. So I think a lot of people may have heard about the results from PJM's capacity auction, the 2024 auction that went into effect last summer, which led to a huge hike in rates. And I think Ohio customers saw their bills increase by around 10 to 36% based on the increase in capacity prices due to the shortfall between energy supply and demand. And in Ohio, we are a net energy importer, which means we purchase around 15% of our electricity from plants in other states, which is then transported to Ohio by way of the regional transmission grid. So just with all of these considerations, the shocking amount of electricity that data centers require to operate really necessitates improving utility accountability measures and requiring data centers to pay their fair share of these costs. We talked a little bit about the behind the meter considerations, and there are so many caveats to behind the meter requirements. Some ideas have been floated that would require data centers to build their own generation infrastructure, which again, that's leading to huge natural gas projects being sited in or like right next to residential areas. And there are a ton of concerns that we have about the public health impacts and the lack of guardrails or discussion of a remediation plan or decommissioning plan and who's going to pay for that. Okay, so our goal for our work around data centers is to resource local communities with the tools that they need to determine whether and how data centers invest in their communities. There are a range of policy mechanisms at the state and local level that are available to address the myriad concerns that communities have. We have identified a few very broad goals for this work to protect state and local revenue by eliminating taxpayer subsidies for data center operators, increasing the use of community benefit agreements or CBAs for large-scale data center projects, establishing strong labor standards for construction jobs, and enabling communities to negotiate agreements with commitments for high road operation and maintenance jobs, and then enhance democracy and transparency around proposed data centers and establish community oversight mechanisms for existing facilities, while strengthening protections for Ohio ratepayers, communities, and our natural resources by mitigating economic and environmental harms generated by the rapid expansion of this resource-intensive industry. And I just want to highlight the NDA piece because obviously it's establishing a community benefits agreement on this project would be a great way to tailor some of these deals to communities' unique needs while enabling them to have more power in informing important development decisions that will have wide-ranging impacts in their communities. But these tools are a very heavy lift, and they often the use of NDAs that conceal any information about these projects until it's essentially too late to intervene or inform some of the decisions that are being made hinders communities' ability to have a seat at the table in key stages of the project negotiations. So it's very important that we are considering communities' concerns and giving them a seat at the table instead of just leaving them on the menu, especially as we see how irresponsible this development has been so far. We really need to do everything we can to engage communities and inform lawmakers about how they can set up stronger protections for Ohio communities to prevent the legacy of extraction that a lot of communities are still grappling with. And thank you.
So Molly brought up a lot of great points about making it difficult for these data centers to come into our communities, right? And I'm interested to talk to Paul. So one of my largest questions after I learned about our data center was, what is it like? What do we do now? How do we stop it? If we can't stop it, then what? What does it look like, right? What life lessons have you learned that you can impart upon us as we're navigating these experiences too? So welcome, Paul. Go ahead and give a little quick bio.
Little introduction for Paul Lambert. He is a longtime Hilliard community leader who served more than a decade on the Hilliard City Schools Board of Education, helping guide local decisions on school finance, growth, and student opportunity. He also served as the interim fiscal officer of Norwich Township in Franklin County. Retiring as the VP of MCI WorldCom's web hosting unit, Lambert has led the construction and operations of large-scale data centers across the U.S. and Europe. He brings deep technical and economic insight to conversations about how big infrastructure projects affect local communities. Lambert has been an active voice in recent debates over Amazon's 3 existing data centers and campuses in Hilliard and associated on-site fuel cell and diesel generation, raising concern about air pollution, carbon emissions, and the new limits on local government control over on-site power generation. Drawing on his experience in IT and local government, he now works with residents and advocacy groups to push for transparent and engaged community-centered decisions on development. He publishes the Educate Hilliard page on Facebook. Please welcome Paul Lambert.
Thank you. My name is Paul, and I build data centers. So we've got a few of them in Central Ohio, as has been mentioned, and one of the concentrations is in our little town, Hilliard, which is a western suburb of Columbus. This began 10 years ago for us in Hilliard, in Central Ohio. I was a member of the school board when this began. We had a company called VA Data show up and say they were interested in building a data center complex in Columbus. And they got 3 of the suburbs in our city to offer proposals for having a data center in their town. They told us we were competing with each other for where this data center might go. They did the presentations under NDAs. I was not the chair of our board. The chair of our board ended up receiving this presentation. The rest of us on the board didn't even know that it happened. That was also true for the city council. The city council president knew, but not the rest of the members of the council. The Kasich administration told us that these data centers are going to be very good for Ohio and that we should be aggressive in our proposals. And guess what? After we all, I say, dropped our shorts to get the best possible proposal out there, they ended up taking all 3, which was their plan all along. Oh, I'm sorry. How about that? Okay, so here's what's going on in Hilliard. This is their first phase. We thought it was the only phase. That big blob that you see kind of on the left of the frame is the Amazon campus. Just for grins, I included on the right side of the frame is the CompuServe Network Services headquarters that I worked for 30 years. And there's a little diamond right in the middle of that, which was one of the biggest data centers ever built in Central Ohio when we built it. I had some responsibility for that. You can see that's about the size of the parking lot for the security building for the Amazon data center. Those buildings are just flat enormous. So what was the impact for this first one? By the way, as a member of the school board, I voted to support the economic development package that was done for this site. They did a pretty good job with the actual construction, although it was a mess for a while, I can tell you. That site was already in the comp plan for the city as a commercial development, so it didn't require any zoning. Our city's pretty restrictive about what architecture needs to look like. And again, I think they did a pretty good job making these buildings be reasonably attractive, and the landscaping is really beautiful there. The lighting's pretty subdued when you drive past it. If you knew there was going to be an industrial or a commercial operation there anyway. This one is no more impactful than those. And it turns out that it doesn't make a lot of noise, even when the generators are running. I caught a time when a number of the generators, and I think there's probably something on the order of 50 of them on this site now. Even when they were running, I ran down and stood on the sidewalk next to it to see if I could hear it, and really couldn't hear the generators over the background noise of Interstate 270, which is right behind it. Okay, so what was the economic benefit of this, we thought? Well, first of all, we gave them a property tax abatement through a TIF for 100%. They pay no property taxes, and it's abated for 30 years. You may know that when you have a building like this, a technology building, the real estate property tax is only on the ground in the building. All the stuff that's inside used to be the servers and all the network equipment and so on, used to be taxed as personal property tax in Ohio, but that was eliminated a long time ago by the Taft administration. So even if this were fully taxed and not abated, they'd only be paying taxes on the building and not all the expensive stuff that's inside. It definitely was a windfall for our city, having the thousands of construction workers that were on site for a while. As was said previously by Prescott, these are itinerant workers. I don't know where they all went. They weren't living in Hilliard, but there's some of these sites all over the city, so they were out there someplace. But with this abatement, the school district and the township got zilch out of this. And I thought that was going to be the last one, and was pretty happy about what it looked like the benefits might be. By the way, this is a little more subtle that may or may not be true in your community, but as a member of the school board, we are always concerned about growth in our district. They're building houses in our community in large numbers. And from my perspective, it was a good thing to have a big parcel of land taken off the market for housing development, just so we wouldn't get another big batch of kids in our schools. So again, it looked like it was worth, the deal looked like it was worth it. But little did we know that they would come along with an additional phase. This was on a piece of ground that was actually owned by the city. They had intended to do a sports facility there. They really didn't get it didn't make economic sense for the city, as it turned out. So the city sold it to Amazon to build another phase. By the way, there's kind of two big classes of these data centers. In our first phase, those are mainly data centers that are for traditional web services kind of stuff. So you can think of things like Netflix, eBay, the online presence for a lot of retailers and so on run out of there. So it's really kind of low compute intensive kind of facilities. These new facilities that they built, like the ones in this picture, are all for AI. They're very dense. They're in essence a giant single supercomputer that's used for training AI services. So they generated, they're dense from an electronic standpoint. They generated an enormous amount of heat, consume a lot of electricity. Very different kind of installation than the first one was. With this one, we asked a little bit more in the deal. So the school district's got a deal here where they pay the school district $1.50 per square foot for the data centers. So it generates $2 or $3 million a year feed to our school district, which is significant. The budget for our school district's about $250 million a year. So this is a good chunk of money, but it's not a real huge part of our budget. And again, the township got zilch, which is kind of important in our community because the township runs our community fire department. Okay, then I thought maybe phase 2 was the end, and then they built another one. They bought a piece of land just down the freeway. So these are roughly about 2 miles from my house in all directions. They bought a big piece of land and are in the process of building this out right now. One of the things they ran into with this one is that they can't get enough power from AEP. So they're going to be putting a natural gas powered fuel cell facility on the site. It's going to be 73 megawatts. It's the largest natural gas fuel cell facility that's been built in the country, second largest in the world so far. And you can see this is right in the middle of neighborhoods. There's an elementary school pretty close to there in a park. When I saw this was going to happen, I started reading the tech specs from Bloom Energy, who's making these fuel cells. And one of the subtle statistics in the parameters for this fuel cell facility is that When it's all up and running, it'll generate 1.5 million pounds per day of carbon dioxide and release it at ground level. I know enough about carbon dioxide to know that it's a heavy gas. It'll tend to stay near the ground. I think it'll create a bubble of carbon dioxide around the fuel cell installation itself, which could be lethal. If somebody walks into it, it could dissipate into the neighborhoods around. We're going to see what happens with that. The EPA has decided it's just fine, and they're going to let it go in. The neighbors aren't very happy about this, by the way, and there's been a lot of public outcry and activism in our community about this. Okay, so these hyperscalers everywhere are kind of running out of power. They can't get as much as they want, so they're turning to on-site generation facilities. One of the things that's really unique, so as a technologist and somebody who built and ran these data centers, this would be terrifying to me. This is a utilization grid for one of the data centers. I forget which one this happens to be. It's not one of the ones in Columbus. It's another one elsewhere in the country. But this shows what the instantaneous load is over about a 2-day period. And you can see these places where it goes to near zero and then suddenly spikes to a very high level. These are swings on the order of hundreds of megawatts of demand in a matter of milliseconds. I don't know how the grid manages that, probably not very well. Their on-sites would have a tough time with this. I think they're going to have to turn to batteries as a way to be like a supercapacitor to generate power in those kind of big hunks over short durations. So what else are they doing? They're putting their own power on site. They can't really use diesel generators for that. They'll have the generators there for emergency backup, but it's not really economical to run diesel generators as a continuous load source. Gas turbines turned out to be a pretty good choice if gas is cheap, and it is in Ohio, but you have to get the natural gas to the site. AWS, as I mentioned, is trying out fuel cells. Meta is putting in a 400 megawatt gas turbine generating facility. These gas turbines are, by the way, like large jet engines, and they can make a lot of noise. It depends on what they do for the noise abatement. Meta is also talking about putting in small modular reactors. If you're familiar in Piketon, there was a facility there for decades, a Cold War facility called the Portsmouth Gaseous Diffusion Plant. It was at one time was the largest consumer of electricity in the country. It's been largely shut down, although they're bringing parts of it back into service. But it's a great place because of all the wiring, if you will, that's already into that area. It's a great place to put a new generating facility. So again, Meta is putting SMRs there. They are supposedly starting out with 6. I forget what the total capacity of those is. And then there's been a recent announcement that it's a many gigawatt, actually, power generation facilities going in there. I believe it's maybe somebody knows. I think it's supposed to be 10 gigawatts that's going to go in there with gas turbines. Okay, so is that good? It's good that they're not competing for the grid resources, but maybe they are. They may use grid resources anyway in addition to this stuff. There is a tariff that was created by AEP that says if you're going to ask for 400 or 500 megawatts of power to a site, we're going to make you commit to that for a period of time, up to 12 years, so that we make sure we recoup the capital investment. The data center companies hate that, so that's the reason it's good for us. So that's a good thing. The bad thing about this on-site power generation trend that's going on is that you have a lack of local control. HB 15 has already been mentioned. Part of what's in HB 15 in the law that it eventually became is that if you put in an on-site generating facility of greater than 50 megawatts, the siting control is done entirely by the Ohio Power Siting Board, and your local jurisdiction has no control over it whatsoever. If we in Hilliard could say we don't want you to put fuel cells in, we would. But Amazon came to the City Planning and Zoning Commission to submit a request, and when they said we don't like all the CO2 emissions this is going to do, we think we ought to talk about it some more. They said, well, no, never mind. And they just withdrew the application because they knew it wasn't necessary anyway. Okay, so natural gas. Again, natural gas is abundant in Ohio, and the natural gas lobby is very powerful at the Statehouse. HB 15, which we've talked about, gives a lot of advantages to the natural gas industry. We've talked about that one. One of the things that was included in HB 15 is not only does the natural gas industry get this kind of advantage treatment through the bill, but they also had reductions made to the the public utility personal property tax. So they're going to save money on the taxes as well. No permission needed. So here's a big thing. I mean, if you want to run new power lines, that's hard enough. You have to rent little pieces of land down through all the farm fields to put the pylons on. Running the gas pipelines are really hard. I mean, you got to dig up trenches for miles and miles and miles and miles. So how do you go about doing that? Well, they figured that out. And that's that you use abandoned railroad rights of way, which there are lots of in Ohio. There happens to be one that runs right up to this site that they're going to put this fuel cell array on. I knew from us laying fiber when I was in the telecom business that you love to use right-of-ways. You may not know that the company Sprint came into existence. It's an acronym for Southern Pacific Railroad Interchange. That was Southern Pacific Railroad ran fiber optic stuff down all their railroad rights away because guess what? You can run hundreds of miles and only talk to one owner. So that's what's going to happen with natural gas. Okay. So if you've got a piece of property that's close to one of these abandoned rail lines, that's a good place to put a data center. Okay, so I mentioned TIFs. I don't know how many of you have run into a TIF. It's an acronym for tax increment financing. It's a mechanism enabled in Ohio law that allows a city to say, we are going to take on a parcel of land a fraction of the money in excess of the pre-development value and redirect it back to building infrastructure. The TIF was originally created, and these are implemented all across the United States. But TIFs are they're traditionally implemented to try to promote the redevelopment of a brownfield. And so if you've ever been to someplace like Youngstown where the steel industry collapsed, they ended up with these rusting out old steel mills and ground that had no infrastructure in it for doing any other kind of development. The city itself didn't have money because its major employer tax source was gone. And so to encourage a new developer to come in and work on that land, they said, we'll promise you that we'll reimburse you for your cost of putting in the infrastructure. We'll reimburse you with redirected property taxes that's going to be paid by whoever you sell the development to. So that's kind of what this flow says, if that makes sense to you. I've already touched on this. And where does the money come from? It comes from these other agencies that are funded by property taxes. And so when I was on the school board, I always used to get annoyed that these are being used, particularly for residential developments, that they're taking money away that should have been directed towards the schools in the township, and we're in essence handing it off to a developer. And this is used a lot in this state. But why are the cities, for some of these obvious things that I mentioned, why do the cities really love these things? The answer is that the law's got a backdoor mechanism in it that says after the infrastructure, after you've reimbursed the developer for whatever infrastructure they put in, which would be, water, sewer, streets, that kind of stuff. After that developer's been reimbursed, if there's any money left over, the city gets to just keep it. They don't have to give it back to the schools or any of the other agencies that have been funded by that. And I can tell you that our city, Hilliard, was funded. They put TIFs on absolutely every piece of development that was done for years, and they used that as a way to backdoor fund the city. And the mayor was fond of saying, I've never had to raise the taxes in Hilliard. But by the way, if you're on the school board like me, we had to raise the taxes all the time to make up for what was lost. Okay, you probably all know about this property tax initiative that's going on around the state. The only reason I bring it up here is whether you're for it or against it. There hasn't been a mechanism proposed for what's going to replace it. So we've got kind of a chaos coming that when this is eliminated, there's already no tangible personal property tax and all of this stuff that goes into the developers. I mentioned to you that the public utility personal property tax rates are being dropped by HB 15 for many elements. And so you've got all these local governments that have counted on property taxes as their main bargaining chip when if you're trying to attract any kind of development. And it's when you, it's a tool that you can use to attract them. It's also the main thing that you negotiate on when you try to get an economic development deal going with them. But what happens when there are no more property taxes, and what happens when all the siting control is given to the power siting board? Then you have no leverage at all. Okay, so last slide. So if you decide to let one happen, your city council decides to let one happen, what kind of things should you think about? Here's the first one. This comes from an attorney friend of mine who is also a city council member. He says, make sure you get stuff memorialized in the contract, like the economic development agreement, so that no matter what may happen with the law, the belief is that the terms that you negotiate into a contract between two parties remains in force, even if they change some of the elements in the law that may benefit the data center operator. Require them to be a good neighbor. Like I mentioned, make sure that you get stuff in the agreement that talks about noise emissions, architectural standards, just all the visual stuff. And then the money. Don't forget the money. I'm pretty sure we left money on the table in our community. I think if we were doing it again today, we'd be a lot smarter about the deal. Make sure you get payments in lieu of taxes to not only the schools, but also to the township, if the township's a significant agency in your community. And this is a big one. I went back and looked through our contracts, not a lawyer, but I went back and looked through our contracts with between the school district and Amazon. And some of the whereases address the fact that property taxes exist. And so I'm not sure. I've suggested to the school board that they go look and see if our attorneys believe that those agreements will survive the elimination of property taxes if that happens. Somebody said this before, ask for one-time contributions, get them to buy a fire truck or a school bus or snowplow or improve the streets. They're going to tear the streets up when they have all that construction stuff around there. Make sure they contribute to that. This one, the company I worked for, we had data centers in a number of locations, and we always used the waste heat from our data centers to heat the office complexes. There's been other places where this is primarily in Europe. I'm thinking a place, I believe it was in Denmark, where they use the big data centers like the Amazon and Meta data centers. They use them to heat their whole city. That's a thing worth asking about while they're in there. And then one of our township trustees raised this just the other night, and I thought it was a great point. Said, insist that they take out surety bonds that will pay for the cost of remediation and demolition should they decide to bail out. Barry and I Prescott and I are very much in agreement that the technology being used today to run AI facilities, I say that it's like we're in the steam locomotive era. That if you know steam locomotives, I'm a railroad buff. Steam locomotives are enormously energy inefficient, but they were the best thing they had for 100 years, and then all of a sudden came along the diesel locomotive. And it cut all that energy consumption and infrastructure needs down. I think that's about to happen with the AI infrastructure, where some smart kid sitting in their bedroom is going to say, "Oh, here's some new math that'll do this a lot more efficiently than we have now." And about half of these data centers will just be abandoned. The key is you have to ask them why you have leverage. Once you've given them the zoning, annexations, all the permitting and stuff, you have no more leverage. And you can ask them for whatever you want, and they'll say no, thank you. So you need to make sure and do all this negotiation while they still need you for something. And then this is a personal point on NDAs. If you haven't run into it, there's a thing published by the Ohio Attorney General every year or two called it's called the Yellow Book. It's very useful for public officials, but I think anybody would find some interest in it. It's the kind of a plain language interpretation of the Sunshine Laws. And I found this particular sentence on page 58 of that manual. It says, signed non-disclosure agreements do not create trade secret status, for otherwise publicly disclosable documents. I won't read the rest of it. But the way these NDAs and a lot of discussions with the data center operators happen in the dark is that they take advantage of a clause in the Sunshine Laws that says that they can go into executive session and keep confidential documents associated with trade secrets. this particular decision, and I forget where this happened, but this particular decision said, no, that's not true. I would encourage any of you that that if you think there's NDAs going on in your community, to file a suit, take whatever legal action is appropriate, and let's see if we can get some judges to make case law that says that NDAs are not they're not valid in these kind of situations. Okay, and that's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, guys, I feel like we need to do a seventh inning stretch, and Jordan is going to bring us home. I'm going to tease Molly. I don't know how to get her Policy Ohio Matters off here, but Jordan is going to be our last presenter of the day. So at this time, Jessica, I'm going to call you out, Miss Jessica Baker, Miss Kim Georgeton, if you guys can come on up. We're going to consolidate the last 45 minutes or so to asking now what, right? How can we become involved? What do we need to do? So Jordan is going to kick us off with that as well. Great information regarding what to do next. Guys, I do not know how to take this off of my PowerPoint. Sorry. I will grab that, hopefully. Nope, I can't get your Ohio Policy Matters off. Sorry. But then we're going to go ahead and do like a Q&A session. So interactive, I'm going to send Caitlin out here in a little bit, tee up some questions that you guys may have, stretch. I don't know about you guys, but I'm freezing at this point. So it was hot when we came in here. Is everybody else cold? Oh my gosh, I'm freezing. Okay, so we can stand up, stretch around here after Jordan too. So thank you guys, and I'll go ahead and introduce Jordan.
Jordan Haire is a Democratic candidate for the Ohio House of Representatives, District 47 in Butler County, running to bring her experience as a mental health counselor, mom, and community advocate to the State House. A lifelong Ohioan, she has worked directly with young people and families, navigating trauma, addiction, and economic stress, shaping her commitment to fully funding public schools, expanding mental health services, and protecting working families. Haire has become increasingly engaged in local fights over unchecked data center growth in Southwest Ohio, raising concerns about transparency, utility costs, and long-term impacts on neighborhoods and farmland. She is running to ensure that the 47th District has a strong voice for accessible healthcare, fair wages, and economic development that is accountable to the people who live and work in the community. Welcome, Jordan.
Thank you all. So the 47th district is up in Butler County, which includes Oxford, Hamilton, and Fairfield Township. We have several proposed data centers all around Butler County right now. And so when I decided to jump into politics as a mental health therapist of 13 years, reading an article about the data center proposed in the city of Hamilton was the tipping point for me back in October. I was like, nah, this is the last thing. This is my last straw. So I sent off an email very quickly and really was curious as to if I made a mistake. But here I am, and the data center was very much part of what brought me here. So in looking up at Trenton, right above us, we share a aquifer underneath the Great Miami River with Trenton. They've already broke ground for their massive facility. It's going to be the size of 5 super Walmarts, if that helps you picture it a little better. And so there's some things going on in that community. Hamilton's data center is currently paused. I'm very actually happy with how the Hamilton City Council managed that by putting a lot of guardrails into place, making the company take care of all the infrastructure. And in that feasibility, the financial feasibility study at the very beginning, the company was like, oh, this is going to take us forever and cost us way more money if you guys aren't going to help us do it. And they put a pause on it. So yay, we want more of that, right? We want to slow things down. My other biggest concern in being in Hamilton itself, like in most of the towns along the river, industries are gone, right? We have these big old warehouses that have been sitting empty for decades, right? Hamilton has done such an amazing job recently revitalizing some of those spaces for community, for generating revenue with Spooky Nook. But it took a long time for us to figure out what to do with them, right? I worry about the tech. We talked about the bubble bursting. We talked about the tech moving on. What's going to happen when you have these buildings, acres and acres of land, and then what? We're going to have to come up with new ideas on how to make these functioning spaces again? That's going to be really problematic. I don't know why we need to reinvent the wheel and do that all again. So there are a couple bills that we had talked about throughout this time that we've all been kind of mentioning. So these are they're brief. So we talked about NDAs. The specific House bill is House Bill 695. It includes county commissioners, trustees, village legislature, and village mayors. So it would prevent them from engaging in an NDA. It would result in fines if they were to do that, and anything in that NDA would be null and void. You might notice that city council is not listed as one of those things. That's also protecting that home rule for those cities and municipalities to be able to take care and make those decisions for their community. So there is a little difference in that sense. So the public records transparency. So there I think was kind of alluded to in this last thing. When you request public records for any of these developments, they're allowed to redact quite a bit of things, right? And have things completely left out that are vulnerabilities, or, as they'd like to say, like some sort of trade secret. So those things can be redacted from public records. So they're still not transparent to us. And that's really problematic. Speaking of transparency, there you might have been reading the stuff about Jobs Ohio this week. It's been kind of kicking up in looking at transparency with what they're doing with the funding that is supposed to be in tandem with these industries being infused in our local economies. Only 25%, I want to say, of their money has actually created jobs like they're supposed to right now. So there's a lot of things going on in that sense. There's the recent controversy over Anthropic. They want to have their product not used for war and other mass surveillance of the U.S. citizens. So they're pushing back on the government. And I think hopefully we'll continue to see more of that, companies not wanting to use these things as mass surveillance tools. Senate Bill 2 is talking about increasing the grid. They want to actually make it easier and faster for these things to start to get off the ground. So it was actually a lot of push towards making it easier to start to build these things. Now, all the other bills here listed are things that actually want to slow things down, right? So the NDAs, want to block those. We have HB 646, which is creating I think it's called the data, I don't remember the exact thing, Data Center Study Commission. And it's made up of several different kind of appointed people based on parties, based on the governor gets a couple of appointees, the Senate gets appointees. All of these things make up this commission that's going to actually study the environmental impacts, the economic impacts. This is a temporary commission that's going to gather all the data over the next 6 months after hopefully this passes. And then they will actually dissolve, but they will release all of their results. So it's an interesting makeup. It would really, it'll be interesting with majority minority party, what that would look like. But again, as we've talked about today, like this is such a bipartisan issue. And it's a place where we can all come together and sit at the table and figure out how we can do this best for our communities. The last one is another big one going on right now is HB 706. That has also been talked about today a little bit. The minimum requirement on data centers, no increases to ratepayers. They have to have capacity at 85%, and they will always pay that at minimum for the power that they're utilizing. So those are really basic requirements that, gosh, they should have been in place a long time ago. But here we are trying to do it now. So you know, these are the things I worry about in my own community. That's why I got involved. So I'm not an expert by any means. I am much like many of you out here, just trying to know what's going on locally and getting tuned into these things that make a really big difference in our life. I didn't know how important our state house was for so many things in our daily lives, right? So I'm with you guys. I want to listen. I want to understand what my community members want. I think, you know, we need to be heard, particularly on this issue. This issue also bleeds into many other issues. So they're very connected. The gentleman down here that was on the school board, you know, touched on schools a little bit. For the data center in Trenton, the company has offered to do to give to the public schools every year. I think it's like $4 million, which is great for any struggling school district. That just sounds amazing. Do you know how many struggling school districts there are right now? A lot. Almost all. So there ends up being the rub there, right? That's enticing for a community to get that money for education. They get that money for education, then the state doesn't have to give them that amount of money anymore. The state saves some more money, and they don't fully fund the public education like they're supposed to. So this is all very much intertwined. Then we add property tax. Things get complicated. So these are just kind of the ones that are touching. These are going to continue to come up. Other bills are being talked about. Let me pick up the last couple that were mentioned. One was the fresh water, or the water one, which we kind of already touched on as well. Grid Cost Responsibility Act, data center tax break bill. That's the one where they want to take away that tax break for all the sales tax on the items they're, you know, building it with. So they want to do something about that, which we, you know, good. Powering Ohio Communities Act. This would require that data centers prove they'll invest in local communities. So, you know, that at the Trenton presentation, that was a very big part of it, whether it was the schools or whether they were going to create job programs within the schools as well. That was their big thing was really with the schools in that one particularly. The Local Development Protection Act would again, that's more about the home rule, letting local governments decide what they want there. Yeah, so there's a couple more bills absolutely coming up as well. Ooh, my bad. So yeah, data centers were why I got into this, really the tipping point, but man, these things, this is going to infect everywhere. So one of the best things that I can, you know, encourage anybody to do, find out who your state rep is. Talk to them. They're the ones making this decision. We still got how many months until the election, right? Some of these are going to be decided this year. We need to get on top of it. We need to talk to those people that maybe we don't even know or never see, and really tell them what we want in these communities. Show up at these things, tell your friends, educate people on the stuff that's really important right now, because there's so much going around that isn't true, misinformation. So more of these community events are definitely needed. So most importantly, vote. Your voice matters. Your voice matters. So thank you all.
Thank you, Jordan. And thank you to all of our panel experts as well. I don't think that we are ever going to have, any time in Ohio history, the amount of subject matter experts in one room at the same time. So I cannot thank you guys enough. This is such an important topic, and very appreciative. I know you guys came in great lengths and distances for this, so thank you. So now we're going to kind of put you on the hot seat, and I brought two individuals up as well to help kind of facilitate this conversation as well. So we're going to go to the section where we're going to do like a Q&A and a community discussion, right? What can we now do? So when I was first faced with this question, first and foremost, I didn't even know how to go to a council meeting. Where are they at? Where are they housed? Who are the players, right? How do you do a successful FOIA request, freedom of information? I did not even know what a TIF was, right? 40-some years old, had no clue what any of that was. So now is the part that we have to become active, right? We just received a wealth of information about what data centers are. My questions that I have is, how do we bridge the gap, right? I don't think e-commerce is going away. I don't think social media is going away. I personally want to see a balanced approach, but I do not want, in my personal opinion, you all can vary, but I do not want these hyperscale data centers that are going to impact not only the health, but our environment and generations to come. So now what, right? Now that we have this information, tools at our fingertips, we will post this presentation as well, so that you can go back, review it if you have any questions. Now is your time to ask what we need to do to get involved. So I've got a few experts up here too. If you guys want to pull your chairs over here, guys, please feel free to stand up. I am frozen at this point. It was hot when we first came in. Now I'm a popsicle. But Caitlin, where'd you go? Wave your hand. Hi. She's gonna be running around. My biggest focus, and I'd like to kind of tee it off, and we're gonna pass the mic up and down. I am not a lawyer, right? What rights do I have? What constitutional protections do I have? I've listened to Kim Georgeton. She's a phenomenal wealth of information regarding constitutional law. I'm gonna throw a little love at Jessica. We are small little peons in the whole grand scheme of things, but we also learned that we are very mighty, right? So we started a local petition, I can have Jess speak to it as well, about what we could do to just even put a petition or a stop or a moratorium on the ballot. In certain communities, we also have moratoriums that are in effect. So my biggest question is, now what? Now that we have the pause, what do we need to do to continue this pause, right? What is the next steps? Is it organizing an organization, getting community members together? Is it petitioning more? Is it learning more about the laws? Is it asking our representatives to get involved? I don't know. That's why I wanted to put this together today with the University of Cincinnati. So these are kind of the questions that I personally have. Please feel free, raise your hand, come up if you want to as well, ask any questions that you have. But can I propose the first question? Constitutional law. Like Jessica and a group of individuals literally went to 2 counties and put together a petition to get it onto the Ohio ballot, right? So once we receive, in fact, I'm going to let Jessica speak to this real quick. She's like, oh my goodness. But then I got a question for Kim as well. Like constitutionally, what can we do?
So we're lucky because in Ohio, we can, as citizens, can present a law to be changed or amended. Indiana and Kentucky cannot. I didn't know that. So 2 attorneys are working very hard. They did our language for us, and we got the first part of the petition. And between Adams, Brown, and 16 other counties, I believe, we pulled in the 1,000 that's needed. We actually collected 1,822 in 8 days. And yeah, I got a sunburn in March. But so we have been nosy and called around to some of the counties that's received them from their Board of Elections, and we know that we have the valid signatures. Last count, we just stopped at that, was 1147. So we're just waiting to see if the Attorney General approves our language. If they approve it, then we move on to the big phase, which we're going to need all your help. And many counties and many groups out here are gearing up and preparing now. So that's going to be the big part. But it's a petition to prohibit data centers over 25 megawatts. So it's a pretty big difference from the 2,000 megawatt they're trying to put in Mount Orab. So that's what we're doing. So we have a page that's called Ohio Residents for Responsible Development, and we hope to be able to just drop the PDF in the Files tab, and circulators can run with it. And because we're going to need all the help we can get.
100%. And to my question to you, like Kim, you guys, I'm going to pass this microphone down to you guys. Is that the best way for us to fight it? Do we fight it on Ohio constitutional law? We've got lawyers here too, so feel free to weigh in. I'm going to hand the mic.
Yeah, great. So just a caveat, I am actually not an attorney. I don't want to be an attorney because actually you as citizens have more power to actually redress your grievances with the government than you believe you do. So in this document right here is the Ohio Constitution, and I'll just read from it directly. If you all don't have a copy of it, you should get one. You can actually order it directly from the Secretary of State's website. Article 1, the Bill of Rights. It's your inalienable rights. All men are by nature free and independent and have certain inalienable rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending your life, liberty, and acquiring, possessing, and protecting your property, and seeking and obtaining happiness and safety. So if something that the government is proposing is contradicting that, you actually have standing to complain about it, like officially complain about it under that, our Bill of Rights. You can actually cite this Article 1, Section 1 as one of your initial, points on whatever letter you're creating. Article 1, Section 2, all political power is inherent in the people. That's you. You have a right. Again, you have standing to, again, list this in your letter. If you're creating a letter, you can actually just copy and paste it and say, in this way, the power is here with the people, not with the government. You also obviously have the right to assemble and redress your grievances with the government. This is Article 1, Section 3. You do not need to go to your state representative. You do not need to go to your town council member. You can create your own letter and you can stand on your own and demand that your rights are respected. Another important section is Article 1, Section 14, the page here. And this is the right for you to be secure in yourself, in your house, with your papers, with your possessions, and that any unreasonable searches or seizures shall not be violated. No warrant shall be issued unless there is probable cause. So this particular section, again, it's Article 1, Section 14. What it says is that these data centers, what are they gathering? They're gathering data about you, and that information may not be accessed by anyone else. If it is, then you have a complaint under Article 1, Section 14 of the Ohio Constitution. You have a constitutional violation that is being perpetrated against you. And you can, again, include this in whatever letter you're creating, just copy and paste this, and then below it, you just say, this is how this is violating my rights. I believe that we all have the right to do this, that we can, as a body of people, we have a civil complaint that's going on here against our constitutional rights. And we can come together as a group of people and we can exercise that. Section 19 is the last section that I'll mention. That is Article 1, Section 19. This is regarding your water rights. Okay, so if any of you live on acreage and there is a well on your property or there is groundwater on your property, Article 1, Section 19 protects your right to exercise your rights of ownership of that water. So if your groundwater becomes contaminated because of said data centers, you have, again, been constitutionally violated in the fact that not only did your village council or your township people approve it, the people at Jobs Ohio sold it, and then the attorney firm, whatever it was, Bricker and Graydon or Voorhees in between, all of those people in that chain of abuse are responsible for violating your constitutional rights. So what I would like to do is inspire and encourage people today to understand what your rights are and to stand constitutionally for those. Again, you don't need representation. You actually have more power as the people versus having representation fighting off of Ohio Revised Code. You can fight directly off of your own constitutional violations. Again, I'm not an attorney, but I have done this. I did it in Trenton when they tried to prohibit people from speaking outside of the city limits. I sent them a letter, I cited all of the constitutional issues with it, and the moment we walked in, they changed their decision on it. So the problem is a lot of our elected officials don't even have a copy of this. They don't even know what's in here, okay? And you have strong rights to be able to demand your redress of those grievances. Another issue that we've seen is with emergency, quote unquote, emergency zoning changes. Okay, they can't do that. That's illegal. So emergency zoning changes, there's no emergency for them to cite. So if they have no reasoning listed for an emergency zoning change, they have nothing to stand on, and you have everything to stand on. So bring that to them as well. You need to construct these letters from yourself and list where you have been harmed based upon your constitutional rights. You also have the federal constitution behind you as well. If it ever goes to the Supreme Court, there are cases that will support these kinds of complaints. So I would just encourage you to get copies of these, to study and know your Constitution. I think that we as a people have been, I will include myself in this because I'm not going to, point a finger at anyone here, but I'm just gonna say that we as a people have been lax on understanding what our rights actually are. And unfortunately, we're in a situation now where our government is subverting our rights. The people that we depend on at the state level, at the federal level. We're seeing this constantly. They are subverting our rights. And if we don't learn how to stand up and use them, our Constitution will be gone before you know it. So it's a matter of putting it into practice. And again, I have people reaching out to me all over the state of Ohio asking for, do you have some suggested language on this? Is there a template for this? I am happy to share any and all ideas. This is an educational experience, but again, I just want to say that this is not legal advice. I am not an attorney, and however, I'm more than willing to happy to help anyone with language or suggested ideas on how to move forward with holding these folks accountable, because it's about time that we hold them accountable. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, guys. Okay, so what kind of questions do you have? Raise hands. Caitlin and I will come around. Let me get this microphone working. And I'm going to leave this up with you guys. Can we share 2 and 2? Yeah.
Okay, so I get to stand and tell you, hi, I'm Peggy Berry. Hello, my Zoom mates. Okay, we've been on Zooms together. I'm with Between the Waters, which is a 501c3 that tries to illuminate and educate on water issues. And I'm concerned not only for the water, given what our EPA, Ohio EPA said, hey, water quality can, go down just, so we can get rid of this water from the data centers. So I applaud OEC for filing a lawsuit. Good luck. All right. Secondly, I am telling you, if you know how to do it, go online and sign up for the Ohio EPA notices, especially air quality. Lima has a meeting, Hilliard has a meeting. They are putting in 151 or 57 generators, either diesel or gas. So you need to be aware of that your air quality is gonna go down in the shitter, so to speak. So one of my questions is, with the EPA the Ohio EPA trying to decrease our water quality, what can we do to make known we are dismayed, disgruntled, and angry? Thank you. Might as well go with Nathan first, and then I guess we'll go with OEC.
Yeah, we can do. I'm sure we could all pass it around for sure. But thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for being here. I think it is incredibly important to understand that we have a lot more power than we know, especially when it comes to government decisions like this. So the Ohio EPA, what they've done is they've put out a potential rule. They have to do that instead of just making a decision because they have to accept feedback from the community. And that's why OEC did submit testimony. We submitted comment opposing that proposed rule. But the reality is that the Ohio EPA is a direct function of the governor's administration and the decisions that the governor and his directors make. And so at the end of the day, the Ohio EPA is going to have to respond to political pressure. But the Ohio EPA can only do, even then, so much within the realm that they are given by the Statehouse. One thing that I perhaps might disagree a bit with Ms. Georgetown on is that it doesn't affect, it's not a great use of time to go talk to your representatives. It's a phenomenal use of time to go talk to your representatives, your state senators and your state representatives. They get to write the laws that the EPA have to follow. They have to work within that framework. So if you want the Ohio EPA not to be able to allow data centers to directly discharge their water into Lake Erie, the streams, our aquifers, I mean, for goodness sakes, this is boiling water. This is hot water that they want to pour into our lakes and streams. A large reason that we have the algal blooms in Lake Erie that we have, in addition to the PFAS and the runoff and all the other issues, is because of water temperature issues. When you increase the water temperature acutely like this, you're going to see even worse impacts on our ecosystems. That's going to hurt our fisheries. That's going to hurt our tourism, our travel, and all of the folks who come up to Lake Erie to enjoy the fishing and recreation. This is a cross-partisan issue. So I strongly, strongly suggest that if you want to make it so that the Ohio EPA can't create a rule or an exemption that allows data centers to discharge, if you want to create a law that says data centers have to use sanitary sewer systems, or they have to use certain practices like closed loop water systems to preserve water, those are decisions that are fundamentally made at the Statehouse by state senators and state representatives, and they can constrain and direct the Ohio EPA, and that's where your time is best spent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, really highlights the importance of public participation and, the fact that you all are here today and there's all these efforts going on. As I mentioned earlier, I think we are maybe trending up. Like I'm trying to be glass half full here. Something I forgot to highlight. So we've talked a few times about the sales tax exemption that's been going on now for 13 years. There was a bill, I think was mentioned, to get rid of that, right? You mentioned that just a minute ago. The bill actually passed the legislature and then was vetoed by Governor DeWine. So, Spencer just mentioned the administration. That's another sticking point. However, the leadership in both the House and the Senate have said they're going to try to bring it back with a veto-proof majority. And so that gives me some hope that the legislature is paying attention, that they are thinking about these things. This study commission is going to be very important, and you all are going to need to help inform it, right? And participate in whatever comment periods or other things that you can do. And, we often place a lot of importance, organizations like the Sierra Club and OEC and others, on formal comment periods, right? Because that's where they collect a record, which then can be used in litigation and things like that. They're very important. You can contact these people at any time, and you should be doing it all the time because they need to hear from you constantly about these issues. And so today's a great step in the right direction, but there's a lot of opportunities for engagement coming up. I'm excited to hear about the ballot measure potentially. That's going to get it on a lot of people's radar as well. So yeah, I think we're trending up. There's a lot of headwinds against us, but as long as we all keep working together, I think we can really make a difference here. Did anyone else on the panel want to add?
I just want to clarify. I did not mean to say that it is not a good idea to speak to your state reps. I do think that's a very good idea as well. So please don't take it that way. What I meant was this is an emergency situation, and your state reps and senators, whatever laws they're trying to put in place is going to take them a couple years. They have to get the legislation, they have to introduce it, it has to go through the House and the Senate, and then the governor has to sign it. So all of these things in the chain are not going to help you today. So the suggestions that I have for you regarding stepping up for yourself, redressing your grievances with the government, that is what you can do right now, in addition to working along the lines with your state reps and other organizations that these guys are representing to help you develop laws that will protect you in the long term. But like I have been in situations where there's a lot of legislation that we want to see passed, and it also gets barred from being passed. So unless the Speaker of the House brings the legislation up for a vote, you're going to be waiting a long time before the conservative legislation gets passed, most specifically because these data center projects are being supported and pushed by very big lobbies who have a lot of money. So that is inherently a problem that I believe we're seeing currently right now with what's getting pushed out to us unbeknownst. So.
Hi, my name is Larissa Ballard, and I'm a representative from Wilmington Residents for Responsible Development. And I wanted to ask about some of the legality issues regarding NDAs, those non-disclosure agreements that are happening with our various councils and our various small towns. And in our case, we didn't know until Amazon already purchased, and then for 2 years preceding that, our zoning and our various codes and small town legislative features were being changed unbeknownst to us on behalf of Amazon. And so in this not unique situation, I know there's other towns similarly sort of past the tipping point for at least one build. I know Paul Lambert today mentioned we should file suit. NDA's sunshine laws in Ohio are in some sort of conflict, what would you recommend from that legal standpoint? Where we want to also balance, an appreciation for our local officials. I don't want to say there was malice, or I would say maybe more misinformation. I think that some of the powers, even above our local council, are also at play here. And we're all learning this. Somebody said the last 12 weeks. I forget who that was or from what location, but that's about the same for us too. We've had about 2.5 months to learn a lot about our local government, our bigger government, and then also all the data center information. This is a really big question, I guess. So what would you recommend for us at this point that's respectful of our local government, but still addressing an issue where the Amazon site they want to build is going to be 0.3 miles from an elementary school and about 200 feet from new buildings, new residential homes? Thank you.
Do you want an answer for that? Okay. Let's just ask questions, no answers. So I have a slightly unique take on NDAs. I think they're obnoxious and we should never do them. But I think there's a bigger problem, which is that there's nothing compelling your local officials to actually tell you what's going on, whether they've signed an NDA or not. Our proposal, in different state, but same sort of thing, our proposal, they worked on for over a year, no NDAs, but they just didn't say boo. They didn't say we're thinking about doing this. They didn't say what does the community think. And then the proposal hits and the process takes 6 weeks to approval because they're treating it like it's a detached garage. I think you have to pressure your local officials to say, if you have one of these, perhaps what you need at the local level is some sort of ordinance that says over a certain size proposal, there's a cooling off period where they have to present it to the public and give you at least 3 to 4 months to respond, rather than this raced through process of just, treat it like a little zoning change. Without that, there's a way for them to jam it down your throats if they're inclined to do it. So don't rest on the hope that an NDA prohibition solves your problems.
If I could say a little bit more about that, our laws in Ohio are different than Wisconsin. We have a home rule notion with cities where they can, charter cities can set a lot of their own rules. And the city I'm from only requires a first reading and a second reading to enact legislation. And that can happen very, very quickly. But your point is right on, is that democracy is not a spectator sport. You have to engage. And even with the NDAs, eventually these matters come up to the public level. They are listed in the minutes on the agenda for the meeting, and you have to read these stuff. And also elections matter. You have to elect people who will commit to being open with the community. In very many communities, the norm is that the public officials, they comply with the sunshine laws here, which means they have the meetings in public, they do the appropriate deliberations in public and so on. But if nobody's there to observe and to react, it doesn't change their behavior. So I agree. A prohibition on NDAs doesn't necessarily get the result we're after. You have to know to ask for the information. You have to go look for the information. It's going by. It's going by in the public record, but you have to detect it and take action.
Thank you for the question. I think it's an important one. So a few things. I think it's important to put all of this, not just understand it, by the letter of the law per se, but also in practicality and in practice. The Ohio Supreme Court is currently a 6-1 Republican majority. It has consistently over the last few years ruled in favor of corporations over individuals on a number of items when it comes to regulatory restrictions. It also has ruled numerous times to weaken sunshine laws in our state. And so the practicality of it is a little bit different than what it's written into law. That being said, House Bill 695 is currently in the Ohio House. It's already received one hearing. It would ban NDAs for local governments who are considering working with data centers or siting data centers. I think that's a really positive step forward. I will also say that while some legislation can take a lot of time, some legislation moves exceptionally quickly at the State House. House Bill 646, which is the bill to create the Data Center Study Commission, was introduced just about 4 weeks ago. It's already gone through 3 hearings in the House, passed through the House committee, and passed through the House floor on a 93-0 vote. So I would just disagree to say that legislation can't move fast. It can when there's a political appetite for it. And that's really the most important thing here to understand, is that there were maybe 1 or 2, really data center focused pieces of legislation in the State House between January of 2025 and December of 2025. There have been like 15 between January and where we are now in 2026. And that's not because everybody just woke up one day and said, oh, I really care about data centers. I think I'm going to write a bill. It's because they had been getting calls and calls and calls, and they're seeing when people are showing up to the town halls in their communities. They're hearing from their constituents. They're hearing from Republicans and Democrats and rural voters and suburban voters and urban voters. They're hearing from people who are worried about water and energy and high costs and air pollution and all of the above. And so this political pressure has already created movement at the State House, bipartisan movement at the State House. Now we need even more pressure to get those things passed, to make those bills better, and to make sure that we can get that into law as soon as possible.
If you're looking for your answer, though, Hail Marys exist in these instances, so other site fights like fracking stuff. If you can find a savvy lawyer who you can work with, I mean, these companies, because they're rushing them through, will make mistakes. So if you can find someone who is really knowledgeable on the processes for zoning or siting or something, if you have a savvy attorney, maybe they can find a mistake the developers made or a mistake the county commissioners made, whatever it is. And if you're really far along in the process, that's probably your best bet.
And just real quick to add on House Bill 695, I think Adam Byrd is the one who put that forward. And that's a great step in the right direction, but the penalty if you sign an NDA is only $1,000. So if these companies are willing to spend billions of dollars, they're not really going to care about spending an extra $1,000 to protect somebody to signing an NDA. So it is possible you might still run into people who are trying to sign an NDA, but it is also the law in Ohio that the sunshine laws permit you to get that information. So the first thing you have to do is find out if somebody signed an NDA. So Lisa and I went to our township meeting and we did a preemptive petition with them. We said, hey, if you're signing NDAs, we need to know about it. And we had an open conversation with our elected officials, and they said, we can tell you right now, we have not signed NDAs. So it's part of it is starting that conversation early enough in advance, which goes back to what the gentleman down there said. This is not a spectator sport. And, as I mentioned also earlier, there's a lot of lobbies who are trying to get their corporate objectives achieved. And the only way to stop that is to be involved. So having those conversations and doing a preemptive petition with the leadership and your council or wherever they are, to county, that's the first step in making sure that conversation is happening before it happens to you.
You said political motivation. Is that what you said, sir? Political appetite. Yeah. Would that also include monetary gain as well?
I'm not entirely sure exactly what you mean, but let's be honest. These data center people who are building these data centers are part of these massive, massive corporations like Amazon, Google, Meta, and others who do make significant contributions through their PACs to candidates across the state of Ohio, but there are also other interests, right? Like, I think very reasonably, the Building Trades Association and IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, there it is. I was going a different direction. For them, this is a massive opportunity for their members to have really good paying jobs in the state. And I'm not going to say to an IBEW member, you don't get to have a good paying job. We're going to stand in the way of that 100% for the benefit of being able to just draw a line in the sand rather than say, they need to be able to compensate fairly for the things that they're using, the impact that they have. We need the research, we need the science to do it responsibly. So, there are people with other vested interests like the building trades and IBW who are also, making investments into candidates. ACT Ohio has endorsed the Republican candidate, well, one of the, not them, the other Republican candidate for governor, largely because he wants to bring more data centers to the state. And so I think it's important to say, yes, that is an impact, but it comes from a lot of different sources, and it's something to be watchful for. But at the end of the day, no amount of money is going to be as impactful as a vote. No amount of money is going to be as impactful as the constituents that people serve. So if they know that you're mad, no matter how much ads they want to throw at you, they're still going to act in your best interest most of the time.
Hi, I'm Melinda Zemper. I'm with Save Ohio Parks. I live in Westchester. And if we can just talk about the quality of life issues that data centers pose. Primarily, we know that these data centers are going to get their energy from fracked natural gas, likely from our state parks and public lands. So here's a question. Do you think it would be effective for these communities that are considering data centers to require in their community agreements mandatory testing of air and water before operations occur, periodically afterward, and to require also mitigation against the increased cancers and respiratory diseases and probably waterborne illnesses that will occur? Thank you.
I'll say definitely yes. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Let it go green. Is it flashing? Okay.
I'll give you a minute. Hi, Melinda. Thank you. That was great. One thing that's important to know, and it's been touched on already. I mean, we've covered a lot of these topics in great breadth, but these projects still need permits, right? From entities like the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency for water discharges, right? They need air quality permits under the Clean Air Act. They need, the correct zoning permits, et cetera. Now, we've seen the legislature, we've seen the administrative agencies, we've seen local governments try to weaken some of these permitting pathways. And so that's not like a silver bullet. But the point is, they still often do need to achieve these things before they can be operational. And theoretically, those permits should be conditioned on mitigation, remediation, ensuring that the discharge is not going to violate water quality standards, et cetera. And so, that's part of the public participation game. It's not just at the state legislature. It's, talking to the permitting agencies in your local government to ensure that they're on top of it, participating in those conversations. I think it was mentioned earlier, to ensure that they're doing it right. And if they're not, again, that's a ripe area to step in and say, we've got to put a pause on this until you've done it correctly. I think that granular level of participation is going to be particularly beneficial.
Yeah, and I also say, we talk a lot about big tech in this example, but something I've realized over the last year of researching this is that big tech needs big oil or natural gas or whoever it is to provide the power to these facilities. Just as importantly, big oil and big gas need big tech to increase the demand in energy. And so we're not just fighting against one. So You're totally right that all those things need to be done, but we're not just fighting against big tech when it comes to that. It's also an energy thing. And I wish no amount of money would keep politicians working for our best interests, but a lot of money is being thrown out around there. And so a lot of the pathways in which you would normally approach this issue, like the EPA, they're not necessarily an ally right now. And that's something that we need to know that going into it, because if we take on good faith that there are organizations working on our behalf and they're not, then we have egg on our face at the end of the day, not them.
Yeah,
So
is that me? Just one last comment. As I mentioned in my slides, you have to know when you still have leverage. And at that point, when they're coming to your local government and there's something they need, be it permitting, whatever other approvals might be needed from planning and zoning and so on, that's when you have the leverage. You can ask them for anything at that point. And so if you want particular architecture, if you want noise restrictions, if you want air quality restrictions, ask for it at that point. What's the worst thing that happened? They say no and leave, right? Haven't you won there too? And so if you're going to invite one of these guys in, make the big ask while you still have that leverage. I think you can be surprised. When I was in the business of building data centers, we had certain site selection criteria. One of them was cheap land, abundant electrical resources. In those days, it was abundant telecommunications. I can tell you for the AI data centers that telecommunications is not as important. And then the one that has become important is that they depend on gullible, naive local governments to give them whatever they want. And so I think it behooves you, if you don't think you have the resources inside your own local government, go find those resources. Find a good real estate attorney, find somebody who's familiar with negotiating these kind of things, and make sure you ask for the right stuff, all the things you want before you give the permits, before you give the zoning approvals and so on. Because once that's over, you have no more leverage.
Yeah, just one real quick for you as well. So I have created a strategic advisory document that has a lot of ideas in it. It's a brainstorm essentially of different things that you can require to be put into these contracts in advance so that it would cover and care for the health. I'm happy to share that with you if you want to reach out to me afterward.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about political solutions to this. I'm over here. Everyone's looking around. Political solutions to this, but what I haven't heard at all about is how do we make our communities unpalatable for the corporations?
Well, I'll say quickly is that all those things that I mentioned, ask them for so much stuff that they can't do it.
Yeah, get your zoning right. You can use your zoning to make them go away because the condition.
For some of us, zoning's not really an option. It's already done. And
No, we passed our zoning illegally. That's my question.
Well,
hold on.
Source for zoning.
So zoning can always be changed via legislation. That's the prescription right there. Is you need to proactively design your zone districts to either condition or exclude data centers.
Okay.
The problem with that is, as has already been mentioned, if there's an application already in the pipeline, a zone change won't make a difference because they've already vested.
Right. And at that point, what can people do, the citizens of a particular community, do to make that community unpalatable to one of the corporations? I mean, protests at the site, what?
I don't have a good answer to that question, but to the first question, we work with Fair Shake Environmental Legal Services, and they have model zoning ordinances and other resources on their website, and they've also been very responsive to local communities and helping them kind of revisit their zoning regulations and helping them firm them up, which is why the moratoriums in the short term can be really effective to give you time to be able to establish those protections and be proactive about it. Fair Shake Environmental Legal Services.
If I could just say too, I won't speak to explicitly like making it unpalatable because I think that's tough and just a little bit broad. But one thing that you can do is incorporate data centers into building performance standards in your city. So your city, many cities already have building performance standards, or if they don't, they can create them that say certain industries with certain number of employees or square feet have to follow certain standards for emissions and water use, et cetera. And that is what allows them to maintain certain tax abatements or things like that. One conversation happening in the city of Columbus, for example, is including data centers into the building performance standards of major industrial sites. That would be a big boost in helping us require them to do certain assessments and make sure that they have to stay under a certain emissions level and things like that.
Yeah, real quick, Deerfield Township, they went ahead and they passed a moratorium on any data center conversations before any data center conversations are going to occur there. They did that proactively. So you need to get people who are inside at your village council or township trustee members to preempt that and do a moratorium before the conversation starts, like if you can. Now, so it depends, to make it unpalatable, I think it depends on at which stage you are in that process. So there are probably different things you can do that you can hit on during each stage, but if you're at the beginning, if you can get your council or township trustees to preempt that with a flat out ban or moratorium, then that's your best bet.
And I'll say one more time that I think if you think about all the processes that happen between when the data center operator shows interest in your town and they get the go-ahead, there's a lot of steps. There's the zoning. There's actually even if the zoning needs no change, it still has to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission if you have something like that. But in parallel to all that is the Economic Development Agreement. And the Economic Development Agreement can contain anything that's not illegal. And so you can ask them for anything. So ask them to build you a new high school. Tell them you want a new park built. Tell them you want 50 new school buses. Just keep asking for stuff until they say, well, we give up, we leave. Maybe they say yes and you get a bunch of good stuff. But I thought an interesting weapon was, I mentioned before, was this notion of a surety bond. Where they have to buy bonds that guarantee that if they walk away from the facility, the money will become available to both demolish and to remediate the land. I think that's potentially a large enough number that could make them say we're not interested anymore. You have to get, and I'll say it for, I'm sure you hope it's the last time. You have to get all this stuff done before you sign all those agreements. Which means you have to pay attention to what your council is doing to make sure that they don't get there.
Basically overload them with bureaucracy.
Just
what you're saying.
no. I'm just saying keep asking them for stuff until they say no.
This is a little bit pie in the sky, perhaps. But if we're talking about smaller communities in particular, we learned earlier about how these data centers have certain needs, right? And so they want to go where they have access to water and the grid and land. If you have a smaller community, you can probably look at a map and see where the potential sites might be to put a data center. Then you can be proactive and try to tie that land up somehow, whether it's by, again, some sort of a zoning mechanism, which makes it more difficult to develop in a certain way, or use a mechanism that we've used in the conservation field for decades, which is buy the land, get a public, and again, I realize this is a huge lift that I'm talking about. This is not an easy thing to do, but that's gonna be the best thing you can do in any land use controversy is control the land if you possibly can. And that's another way, I guess, just to tangent on that a little bit, to find out what might be coming down the pipeline. Who owns the land or who is it being shopped around to? And if some of these companies already own it, well, that's a huge red flag. If it's for sale, find out more about who's looking to buy it. Maybe again, find out what the owner wants, et cetera, et cetera. But that is an extra governmental way of going about land use. We always want to do that, but
So it is a double-edged sword because you have the potential for behind-the-meter generation, right? So what the most efficient way for these data centers to power themselves is to plug in directly to the grid. And in their perfect world, they just pay for how much energy they use out of the grid, and they don't worry about the increased costs on all of us as consumers, the increased cost of transmission infrastructure that needs to get built out for that massive amount of power to get moved. They just want to be able to plug right in. They're working toward that by doing this behind the meter generation, which just basically means instead of plugging into the grid, they are creating power generation on their own site. So that's where you're getting these natural gas plants that are being built next to data centers to power the data center. If we do what you are suggesting, which is make it more difficult for them to plug into the grid, I don't believe that's going to stop them from doing the data centers. It's just going to make it more advantageous for them to continue to build behind the meter generation, specifically natural gas and small scale nuclear. And that behind the meter generation is limited in its regulatory oversight from organizations like the PUCO or OPSB. So it might even be less environmentally friendly than if they were to connect into the grid. I think in our perfect world, they do connect into the grid, but they do so while paying a massive tariff to pay for all of the infrastructure improvements, all of the transmission improvements, all of the increase in demand that is going to increase costs. And ideally, they're doing so with renewable energy so that we're not increasing our emissions and pollution while we are allowing them to power these plants.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Terry Burchak, right here. I'm from Hilliard, Ohio, a town you've not been hearing about today. I want to thank all of you for giving your time this afternoon and sharing your information. I am more overwhelmed than I was when I came down, but I also have some resources now that I did not have before. But what I'm running into is I basically drew the golden ticket, and I'm in the spot where Paul was talking about that, where AWS is trying out, I hate that word, the natural gas fuel cell, the 73 megawatt facility that will be the largest in North America, is my neighbor. I'm less than 0.4 from it, just basically a couple streets away from it. And it terrifies me because I actually had a chance to sit in on the public hearing, and I have this wonderful thing that's the draft. This might as well be Klingon to me. I don't know what to read, where to look at, how to pull out what I need so that the draft that I have is impactful. Where do I start?
You can email it to me and I can look at it and I can email you back. And I'll write my email down for you in a bit.
And guys, real quick, it is at 4 o'clock right now. So I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. If the panelists are fine staying, you guys are fine staying too, please ask questions. But just want to tell everyone thank you if you need to leave at a hard stop 4. So thank you. And as I say, I know you have questions too, but.
So I actually don't have a question. I have a strong recommendation, and that woman speaking brings home exactly why I want to say what I want to say. So I'm here as a longtime community organizer, and I'm also a frontline storyteller. I've mostly focused on community impacts of the cradle to the grave of fossil fuel extraction, production, and transport. And I've also been to East Palestine a few times. And the first time I went was on the 2nd anniversary last year, where I went into the creek with a resident and found active contamination. And the reason why I do that is because it's just so important to not only tell these stories, but also, because they need to be told, but the people who share them, they feel very alone. And that makes me very sad, because what happens to them often goes unnoticed and without recourse. And so being an on-the-ground organizer in towns where there's active data center construction, now I know what the impact is to the residents who live near it. And so basically my tagline with this issue at this point is that data center construction is the most cruel thing a city can do to its residents. And so I can't overstate the importance of how much residents who are being directly impacted by this construction need to have a seat at the table in these discussions, not only so their stories are being shared, but also so they can hopefully help to shape policy, because data center legislation with protections for residents really needs to be a priority. I'm sorry. I had more stuff I wanted to say, but honestly, I've been up since like 3 in the morning and my brain just kind of shut down. But yeah, I just want to just reiterate how important it is. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say, that we often talk about the economic and the environmental impacts of these projects, but the resident impacts who live near the construction are often overlooked, and that needs to be just as important of an issue.
Hi, Amy from Trenton. Sorry. I just wanted to ask, so those that have worked in data centers before, have you ever seen post after build the reports of water and air quality afterward? That's one thing we've asked, like, please make sure that we get this. But what I'm concerned is that what we'll get is their internal studies and not like independent studies. So that's a big concern that I've had.
I was mentioning earlier about permits under various laws, and that's where that information is going to be generated and live. So if they have a permit under the Clean Water Act, for example, to discharge water, they have to report on that discharge on an annual basis. You can look at those discharge reports and find out what's going on if they're exceeding limits and not being enforced against, for example. And so, that to answer your question pretty directly, that data should be generated, and you, as a citizen, through a public records request, should be able to get that data. Now, a lot of times you can have to jump through hoops and stuff like that, but there should be a direct route for you to get the information that you're looking for.
Through the city or through the company?
So it's definitely going to be through whoever has done the permitting. And unfortunately, you're going to probably run into an alphabet soup of different agencies, both at the local and the state level, that are doing that. That's where engaging with folks that have done it before is often helpful. But you're not going to probably get that information directly from the company unless it's through a publicly reported, permit report, essentially.
Hello. I actually am a member of a family that was contacted recently and offered disgusting amounts of money for our property. We're saying no. Thank you. However, it is very tempting for generational amounts of money for our neighbors who are elderly and farming. The Amish are farming it now. But so my question, we had a township community meeting similar to this, and my understanding in getting a moratorium in place, zoning has to be in place. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. So in farming communities, zoning was a 4-letter word up until this change of life. So the fact that no one spit on the ground when I suggested zoning was very encouraging. And now we are in the process of getting like the zoning committee together, getting appointees and doing all that. Wanting to preserve the agriculture, also wanting to be able to have family members come back and live on the farms. Is zoning flexible enough for us to put something in place to keep out data centers, but to still be able to have some flexibility with our land as far as what we do want to do with it?
So a zone district under a comprehensive plan has to have a set of listed primary uses. And the use of the property is restricted to what's on that list. And there's obviously going to be secondary or ancillary uses as well. If you have a farm, you can put a cow barn out, for example. But your zoning code is going to spell out what those uses can and cannot be. And you can write that as narrowly as you want to. Now, there's always going to be litigation, right? These big corporations are going to try to fight that. But there is great power in zoning laws, so long as they are in place when, you know, applications are submitted and things like that. That's great news to hear about your community, and it sounds like you are on the right track.
I just wanted to say, oh, go ahead. Did you want to say something?
I did, thank you. So in our region, I've heard, again, not an attorney, and I don't know exactly how this works, but I've heard of a number of occasions where conservation easements have been placed on parcels. And so that's an act, as I understand it, the property owner can take. It's completely independent of zoning. In the cases I know of, it's been where actually the community, the government, the local government would buy the government, or it might be an agency like the Sierra Club or whatever, would buy would pay the farmer for to place the conservation easement in place. And that would also protect the land, and you don't have to wait for the zoning.
The one wrinkle with that, and that is a very powerful tool. It could be conservation easement, it could be an agricultural easement. Basically, what you're doing is restricting the way that the land can be used in the future by deed, right? One wrinkle with these easements, though, is that they often, if not always, have to be approved by the local government. And I've seen instances around here where a property owner wants to put her land into a conservation easement. They've got a land trust lined up to pay for that easement and own it in perpetuity. And the local government said, no, we'd rather something else happen to that property in 10, 20 years. So you still need to have your electeds on board, even when those sort of private property decisions are being made, which is frustrating, but it's necessary.
Yeah, just a few things here. You can definitely reclassify permissible uses if you're looking to do maybe classify it as either heavy industrial zone, or you can explicitly exclude agriculture A1, A2, or EFU zones. So you can actually specify what's excluded from data center usage. There's also a category called exclusive farm use overlays. So you can adopt or strengthen those preservation overlays. And then there's also an option to require a no feasible alternative finding before any rezoning, require those applicants to demonstrate an independent analysis that no suitable industrial zone parcels exist within a defined radius. And I think somebody already mentioned the conditional use permits. So that's what I would have to add.
If I could say one last thing. So I'm a country boy too. And I can remember many conversations in our community. We have a large conservation district in the west part of Franklin County called the Big Darby Accord. That I participated in some of the creation of that. I didn't have a big role. I was one of 200 people that was involved on the committee. But a big conversation that went on with, among my neighbors in the farming community there was, what right do other people have to say, I have to keep my land in farming when I've got a chance to, perhaps receive generational money, as you say. One good friend had a great line. She said, People want to come out here and enjoy my Amber Ways of Grain. Well, guess what? If you want to enjoy that in perpetuity, you need to pay for it. So I think there's some fairness that we have to have here, that when we're talking about, folks like you, folks like my neighbors who have a chance to have life-changing amount of money paid for the lands, if you want to tell them, no, you can't do that, you have to start thinking about ways of compensating them for that as well.
I just wanted to say thank you for all of those specific ways we can navigate. We're from Adams County and we've been fighting the fight for about a month. It's been exhausting and none of us asked for this. And the corruption is absolutely disgusting. Nobody wants the data center, and everybody is realizing now after a month of back and forth about do we want it, don't we want it? No information from any of our elected officials. We have all come to understand that our local government is really the biggest issue right now. We have to get them out of office, removed. We have to stay the course. And when we get our big mega petition back from state, everybody in Ohio needs to sign it. So we have to all, every person in this room, network right now and find scores of people in your life that you know, make sure they are registered voters so you can get on board and help with the petition. And that's going to be the way that we can all battle this. And I know people are scared. The gentleman down here, he's where we were about a month ago. You just feel like you're going up against a monster. I want to make a suggestion inside the commissioners' meetings. When they rattle off a number and you don't know what that code is, just say, hold on a second. What was that code? Will you just give me a minute, please? Google it. They'll get mad, but that's okay because many of us probably never heard of a moratorium until this month. And you are going to have corrupt officials for whatever reason. They're going to stand in your way. Just remember to stay the course and stand united with your community. All right. When you have disagreements, say yes. We have to have this difficult conversation. I understand. I hear what you're saying. And don't get into arguments. Just try to move forward as positively as possible and know that everybody in Ohio and along the Ohio River and in Appalachia is fighting this fight right now.
Thank you. And we're going to take one last, thank you, Emily. We're going to take one last question from Barry. And as we're starting to wrap things up, please feel free to grab a QRC code. There is a link tree to it. Kat can probably tell you a lot better than I can. But what it does is it directs you to your community pages. So if you guys bear with us, obviously there were 17 different communities represented today. And I cannot thank you guys enough for coming out. In the next week, after we've all congregated and met today, we're going to start building up that link tree. So if you want to get information to your specific community, you can find it whether it be on a Facebook post or Facebook page, a website or whatnot. That QRC code will take you to that link tree as well. So Barry, if you can wrap it up with our last question, thank you.
I'm so sorry. I have to run back to Columbus. So thank you so much for having us. And apologies for running early. I will leave a bunch of my business cards here on the table. So feel free to reach out anytime. But thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you. Real quick, before all the presenters or people start to leave too, can we give one round of applause for our guest speakers today? Many have come in great distances, so greatly appreciated. Go ahead, Barry.
I'm Barry Blankenship, Woodsdale and Trenton Environmental Resistance. I appreciate each and every one of you for coming. Some of you I know personally or have talked to through Zoom, so I do appreciate it. The question I have is, I know we're trying to do away with NDAs, but we're having a situation where our city's hiding behind executive session. Is that something legal, or is that something that they're doing that it's illegal that we could fight back on?
No, thank you. So there's always going to be rules around how and when a body can go into executive session, and it have to be for certain topics, usually like discussion of pending litigation or personnel matters, two pretty popular topics for executive session. But the thing that also has to be done is if an entity goes into that session they must report out on what was talked about. They don't have to, talk about the details, but they must tell you what they were talking about in that executive session. I don't know if that helps.
It does.
Okay.
Because we're not getting information from it at all. What they do is they say, we don't have to tell you that, it's executive session. So everything they do, they hide behind that. They go back in their back room, they talk for a half hour, 45 minutes. We never hear nothing else back.
Let me go off on a really quick tangent because it's come up a couple of times about emergency ordinances and waiving of second and third readings. That it's another example of what you just talked about. So there are laws that govern these things. Local governments don't always follow them. They don't always have an attorney in the room to tell them what the law is, and probably the elected officials themselves don't know. And so sometimes it's nefarious, sometimes it's not, but you have to hold them accountable and you have to stay on top of it. And you can be sticky, right? You can demand the things that are yours by right, such as the information about why they went into executive session. And if they don't give it to you, well, then there are legal options. And so I encourage everybody to exercise your rights.
Thank you. Okay, thank you guys, everyone. Thank you once again to the speakers. We have recorded this event. There's a Zoom link as well as a YouTube, so we will get that out to your community pages. Please feel free to watch the entire 4.5 hours again. Sorry, it was a long-winded, but lots of information covered. But thank you guys once again. Thank you to the University of Cincinnati, to the senior students to put this on again, and once again to all the speakers who came in today. So thank you guys.